Good evening. Thanks for coming. The power's out, so I will be the PA system this evening. I don't know why, but it seems like every time I go to one of these prepper events, there's some kind of catastrophic storm somewhere, so I apologize. My fault. My name's Bear from the internet, and I was invited here by Jason and Shelly from Kentucky Sustainable Living to talk to y'all about Caleb House this evening. I would assume you know what Caleb House is. Maybe, maybe not. However, since some of us don't, I made a couple of notes on my Palm Pilot 1.0 here. I'm going to tell you who we are, where we came from, what we do, why we do it, where we're going, and how you can assist if the Spirit moves you. Cool? Awesome. So, Caleb House, who are we? We are a 501c3 charitable organization, registered nationally. We do counter trafficking in the United States of America, not OCONUS, not outside the United States of America. We do counter trafficking in the United States of America because basically no one else does it. What they do is fundraise here in the United States of America and then go to places like Haiti and Central America, South America, Southeast Asia, and do counter trafficking work there. And it's not that the women and children, the widows and the orphans in those places don't need help. They do. They absolutely need help. But nobody does anything about counter trafficking here, regardless of whether or not Angel Studios produced a movie that's made up about the things that you may or may not have done. Caleb House is staffed almost entirely by volunteers, many of which are SOF veterans, Special Operations Forces. We have a lot of partner agencies and organizations that we work with, not just for the rescue of children, but also for the restoration, which is the critical need in counter trafficking. Rescue is good, but there's no place to take children after they've been rescued. Approximately 17,000 children per month are recovered. There are 420 beds sanctioned by the Department of Homeland Security in the United States for recovery. That's a BS number because only 80 of those beds are operable, which means there's no place for the 17,000 kids per month to go. Oftentimes become property of the state, which is a problem because in many cases they were trafficked from the state in the first place. The recidivism rate is 78% for a child that has been trafficked once to be trafficked again. The behaviors that were perpetuated upon these children become learned behaviors, which they then act out on others. It's a generational curse. It's a learned behavior. One offender, statistically, is responsible for 82 victims. Not 82 instances of offense, 82 victims. So it's an exponential growth in the offense. So what we do is we build restoration facilities, which the best way I could paint this picture for you are communities that are semi-off-grid, out in the woods, staffed by house parents that love the kids in their care, where we take broken people and put them back together again. The means and methods with which we do that, I can only describe to you vaguely, but we are working with the Attorney General's office in order to be able to codify what we do to make that the state of Oklahoma and national standard for restorative care, because there isn't one. Department of Homeland Security has 5,000 pages of regulation related to counter trafficking. They also have an average tenure for somebody in the position of counter trafficking in DHS of 8 months. So the turnover is so great that there are no subject matter experts inside of DHS to interpret the 5,000 pages of legalese to be able to articulate the standard for somebody like me to adhere to, which is why it's cool to be working with the AG's office, although they've been in the news a lot here lately, but there are still, believe it or not, a handful of good people in government working with the AG's office in order to be able to develop an actual standard that people that want to help can adhere to. That's what we do. We do rescue, but more importantly, we do restoration. Somebody has got to put kids back together again. We came about, I've got 2 501c3s, the first of which is called Grindstone Ministries, which is a pro bono disaster relief organization that is currently on its 51st, 52nd deployment in the last 6 years down in the Kerrville, Texas area for the catastrophic flooding in Texas. Grindstone is staffed 98% by volunteers, and we're really bad at sitting still. We like to do stuff. Our love language is diesel fuel and chainsaws. And so we were in between deployments a few years ago. We found a restoration facility that needed help. They came to me and they said, Bear, in one of our buildings, the floor on one side of one room in one of our buildings is a little spongy. Can you take a look at it? Sure. We got nothing else going on. Why not? Anybody here in construction? Show of hands. Are you familiar with the term scope creep? Yep. So, I don't know, 200 square foot of flooring turned into 6 weeks full-blown deployment at this place, touching every part of the facility. From the water pipe in and the sewer out to the power in and the roofs and the HVAC and all of it. And it was a beautiful experience because the Father was all the way in it. Just as a quick example, the AC condenser unit outside one of these buildings, it's older than I am, would not work because it had a bad capacitor in it. And I didn't have one of those, and nobody else did. So we just threw up a quick prayer to Dad and said, hey, can we have one of these, please? We get done praying, and we're in the middle of nowhere. And this little red Nissan B2000 pickup truck is bumping down the road, stops, backs up, and pulls up straight at us. And a little crotchety old man gets out of the truck and says, what are you boys doing? We're trying to fix this AC condenser. What's wrong with it? It needs a capacitor. He goes, let me see it. I hand it to him. He walks to the back of the truck, pulls one out, hands it to me and says, there you go. Hops in the truck and drives away. And it was like that for 6 weeks straight. So second to last day there, I'm walking outside of the building that we were all sleeping in, going to the chow hall. It's early in the morning. It's a cool, clear day. And I'm looking up at the little puffy clouds in the sky, thanking the Creator of the universe for this opportunity. I'm like, this is amazing. He's like, yeah. I was like, this is so important. He goes, yeah. So this is a really important thing that we're doing. I'm hyping myself up. And he's egging me on, going, yeah. I said, there needs to be more of these. And he said, yeah. And you're going to build them. Record stops. And now I'm standing in the middle of this green space arguing with the Creator of the universe because I know nothing about counter-trafficking. Nothing. And so I'm telling Dad, I'm not your guy. I don't know how to do this. His exact words to me were, you build the buildings, I'll handle the rest. Okay. Now I have an option. Only 2 options here, decision point. I can be obedient or I can be disobedient. I chose obedience, which does not make me special, does not make me a hero. There's not a single person in this room that can't make that same decision in whatever capacity you are called in. So I guess that's the first lesson of the evening. I'm not special. Don't put me up on a pedestal, because every one of you is capable of at least as much as what I have done, because I haven't done it. The Father has. So I said, yes, we'll build this. We wrap up that deployment. I'm in a board meeting shortly thereafter. and I'm trying to explain to my board of directors for Grindstone, hey, I know we said no new projects, but we're going to need a new website, some more insurance, a new 501c3 filing, a new board of directors, a new executive director. And they're like, hey, hold on. What are we doing? I said, we're getting into the counter trafficking space. And they said, why? Everybody's in the counter trafficking space. Yep. And most of them are liars and grifters that are earning an income for themselves off of the backs of serially raped children. And that's a fact. I, just so we're on the same page, do not receive any compensation from Caleb House whatsoever, nor will I. And that is in our founding documents. It's not about an income for me. I also own companies I'm taken care of on the for-profit side. If you're going to give, give. If you're going to earn, earn. And don't let those two things mess each other up. So we founded Caleb House. Caleb House is named after Caleb in the Bible. He was Joshua's homie, one of only two guys that gave a good report when they went in to spy out the Promised Land. And one of only two men of 603,550 of the original generation that went into the wilderness that made it into the Promised Land. And if you've read the book of Joshua, when they go into the Promised Land, everybody thinks that if God has ordained it, it will be easy. What they missed was it was 5 years of warfare in Canaan to take the Promised Land, and God had ordained it. And so as the fighting is winding down, there's a mountain called Hebron. And Joshua and Caleb are having a little sidebar conversation, and Caleb says, I want that mountain. And Joshua says, New Living Bear Translation, homie, you're really old. And there's not one, not two, there's three giants, the sons of Anak, the Anakim, are up there. And Caleb says to Joshua, I'm as good today as I was the day that Moses tapped me on the shoulder and said, go spy out the Promised Land. It was 45 years ago. And Caleb goes up the mountain and slaughters the ever-loving crap out of not one, not two, but three giants. It takes Hebron. Hebron later becomes the land grant of a dude named Obed-Edom, which is where the ark lands, which becomes the threshing floor, which becomes the Temple Mount, which is where Messiah was crucified. So it all connects. If Caleb didn't have the confidence in his relationship with the Most High to go up the mountain and slaughter giants, none of us would be sitting here right now. And so that's what Caleb House does. We slaughter giants in the Promised Land. This mission is huge. As I mentioned, most of the organizations that are involved in counter-trafficking pay lip service to it. 92% of all funds raised for counter-trafficking are spent on awareness. 92% for Instagram posts, Facebook campaigns, YouTube videos, speaking events. I'm pretty sure we are all aware that trafficking exists and that it's bad. It is not my intent to worry about public perception when it comes to trafficking. It is my intent to end trafficking to the best of my ability. It's a lofty goal, but we're working towards it. And so after we founded Caleb House, knowing that we were going to focus on restoration because that's the critical need, 17,000 kids a month recovered, 420 beds in the entire country to restore them, 78% recidivism rate. How do we fix those numbers? We got involved in restoration. And we got involved in restoration because we unwillingly got involved in recovery. We ran our first mission off of a phone call because there were 9 people who were being exploited that needed to get out, and our window of opportunity to get them out was a 12-hour window. And so one of my guys called me and said, hey, I said, where are you? And he told me, and it was nowhere close to my house. I said, what do you need? He said, I need everything. Cool. I sent some text messages out on my phone. Within 15 minutes, my truck was filled with a bunch of badass operators, and we moved. And we showed up to a location under the cover of darkness, got 9 people out, put them in a dump trailer with stuff on top of it, So it just looked like a dump trailer full of random crap. Sped out of there, went to a safe site, got blown at that safe site, bugged out to another safe site, got blown at that safe site. The battle was on. And about a week later, landed at a long-term safe site and began the process of restoration for those 9 individuals, knowing nothing about rescue. Nothing. Then we started building Caleb House, because what I was told was you build the buildings, I'll handle the rest. And so what Caleb House is we operate we use a house parents model. Each house can fit 6 to 10 individuals, depending on the house and the circumstances around that individual. We work predominantly with widows and orphans, accompanied minors. When you think of trafficking, most people think of little brown kids in cages in the back of a semi or in a basement somewhere. And that happens, but that is not even kind of the majority of what happens. It's mostly middle to upper class white men between 25 and 55 years old that start by exploiting their own family. Then they share that content that they create with other people like them via the dark web or in person, which now you have a network developing. And then at some point, they get found out, which usually leads to increased rate of assault and or homicide. That's one level. That's the most basic level. The next level up is organized crime level, cartel level, where people are treated as product, just like a bag of heroin. One of the most sickening quotes I've ever heard is, "Children are the new heroin," because I can sell a bag of heroin one time, but I can sell a 5-year-old 10 times a day for 10 years before they're used up. Yeah. And that operates at the regional level. And then there's the nation state / global level, where we have been warned by people within our own government to shut it down. You're getting too close. You need to stop. You're asking all the wrong questions. To which we have said, I know there's children in the room, but to which we have said, kiss my hairy white ass. We're not stopping. Which as a result, has made me wildly unpopular with quite a few different people. And I don't care, because we're all going to die sooner or later. And while I'm in no hurry, I have a beautiful wife and 4 awesome kids and really awesome friends. We're all going to die anyway. Cool. I would rather this life meant something. So, our restoration program has no timeline. What I mean by that is it doesn't run for 12 months or 18 months or 24 months, because I'm not going to tell a 3-year-old they've got a year to get their poop in a group and then kick them out again. So our kids are our kids. And when they graduate from our program, just like when your children grow up and leave your house, they're still your kids. And you still want to talk to them on the phone and hope that they call you whenever they have problems, and, make sure they're on the right career path and give them life advice and all of that. And so it's a lifelong relationship, because these are children. And my job is to build the buildings. And the Father has absolutely blessed us by sending us all the right people at the right time. He has never given us what we wanted, but he's always given us what we needed when we needed it. So he's also, being perfectly frank with you, allowed us to make a lot of mistakes in a short period of time. And there's so much mercy and grace in the mistakes he's allowed us to make, that they were big enough and painful enough to learn from, but not so big that they destroyed us. It's probably lesson number 2 for y'all in all of this. Like I said, when we started, I knew nothing about counter-trafficking. And my impression was, there are professionals that handle this. There's not. There's one other group that we have become aware of, and have worked with in the last 5 years that I could recommend. That group's called Sentinel Foundation, for those who would want to know. Sentinel Foundation. Those are good people, and they actually do stuff. Everybody else, any other organization you can think of, I've met them, I've talked to them, we've checked each other's fruits. That's biblical. Messiah tells us to do that. There's one other than Caleb House I can recommend. And that's not because we're cool. It's because everybody else is just faking it. And so I was deluded into thinking that this problem was being handled, and it's not. So, I think I've kind of touched on why we do this. We're biblically commanded to forsake not the widow and the orphan. Messiah tells us to love our neighbor as ourselves. A lot of times, it's weird because I'm an ordained pastor now, which I would have never thought was part of my life path, but I am. I still say bad words, and I'm frankly not even kind of working on it. I got more important stuff to do. I still like a little bit of whiskey on occasion, not a lot. Drinking's okay, drunkenness is not. But I don't know. We're supposed to love people. We're supposed to help people who can't help themselves. And a lot of people have asked me, well, who's my neighbor if I'm supposed to love my neighbor? And the answer to that is, once we start quantifying who my neighbor is, it means we're looking for reasons why we don't have to love someone. And that's pretty convicting if you stop and think about it. Now, in the same breath, I believe in the age of accountability. One of the things that I'm known for saying is we do bad stuff to bad people, and we do. Because at some point, there are people who had bad stuff done to them, usually as a child, who now knowingly are doing it to somebody else. So there's a huge element of generational curses to what we do. And a lot of people will take that with a spiritual connotation. And there is a spiritual connotation to it, but it's manifested in the physical because we're dealing with learned behaviors. We have had to retrain what playtime looks like with many a child because of what they were taught playtime is. Yeah, exactly what that means. And again, there's kids in the room, so I'm not trying to make anybody too uncomfortable. But we do this because it's the right thing to do, and somebody's got to do it. And like I said, I'm going to die sooner or later anyway. And it's required of me. If I don't do this, when I stand in judgment in front of my Creator, I'll be held accountable for it. Simple as that. Every one of you has something like that in your life as well. What it is, I don't know. And I would submit, I don't think any other person knows either. If you don't know what it is, you need to ask Dad. And you'll be presented with the same opportunity to be obedient or disobedient that I was. And if you listen, it won't be easy. 5 years of warfare in the promised land, but it will be good. If you don't listen, Dad will whip your ass. Ask me how I know. Moving on. Where are we going from here? We are building our first restoration facility right now. Started as a raw piece of land. When I got there, there was a clearing no larger than the width of this area that I'm standing in right here that didn't have trees and scrub brush on it, and it was relatively flat. I wanted a D8 high track. That's a bulldozer. The father gave me a D4. Okay, better than a shovel. I wanted a Cat, 345 track hoe. He gave me a 308. Better than a shovel. So we started digging dirt, moving, building roads. Our security building is up. Our barn/warehouse is up. The first care house is up. We are building the housing for the on-site care director now. And the goal is to build 10 houses on that property that will allow 60 children to be restored at any one time. We also currently maintain 3 different safe sites, safe houses, for both short-term and long-term care, where we provide victim services, advocacy. That's a huge thing. We've gotten laws changed in 4 states already, both concerning what's called ex parte, the ability for a victim to testify, to provide their testimony without being in the same room as their offender. That's a really big deal, because kids make bad witnesses anyway, and they make terrible witnesses when the person who has broken them is sitting across the room from them. So we've been able to change the laws in 4 states where we can take a written testimony, a certified trauma therapist can take a written testimony from this child and have that presented into evidence, which leads to part 2, getting meaningful conviction. Recently, there was an individual in California that we became aware of. We did what we do, and based upon witness testimony and DNA evidence, we were able to get a conviction. They got the maximum sentencing in California, which is 365 days. Disgusting. I'm a whole Bible believer, and Dad says I get to hit that person with a rock, and I really want to. However, on multiple occasions where I could have, he has not allowed me to. And I think the reason for that, you know how frustrating it is to watch an absolutely scumbag POS that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt is hurting people through a rifle scope? And you got a 175 grain Sierra Match King M118 LR, chambered, 3.5 pounds of pressure on the trigger, and this problem goes away? But so do I. And then this thing dies, and the good works end. So, not only changing what witness testimony looks like on the victim services side, but also meaningful conviction. We run a team of what we call our white-collar professionals, which are trauma therapists, doctors, chiropractors, anybody who's got a degree with a fancy piece of paper up on the wall, that when our kids need something, they come to us and they help us, and that's awesome. We also run teams of blue-collar professionals, my kind of people, plumbers, electricians, HVAC, dirt work, paving, whatever, that want to donate their time to come out and help or make in-kind donations. We have one gentleman right now that has committed all of the electrical materials for the first restoration facility. All of it. Every wire, every plug, everything from the power line in for 10 houses in all the buildings, which is awesome. We have another individual who said, you will never buy an appliance in your life. He owns an appliance store. And just, hey, we're building another house, we need a refrigerator. He's like, cool, tell me what you need. And it just shows up. I have another individual who runs a paint store. He's like, you cannot buy paint. You just tell me what paint you need. Which is, I guess, part of the Father saying, you build the houses, I'll handle the rest. So, we also have field teams. I have a field team in a different state right now that hopped on a plane last night to go somewhere and go pull people out of a bad situation. And so, like I said, we operate CONUS, Continental United States, because practically no one else does. And the reason they don't, and I've asked many, many people this, including names that you're familiar with, why? The answer is always the same. Well, it's just really hard to operate in the United States. It's so much easier to operate in Asia. We can do whatever we want in Asia. So because it's hard, we're not going to do it here. That is the weakest response I've ever heard to anything. It's hard. So basically what you're saying is, I don't want to. So we're building Facility 1 now. The long-term vision. When we get done with the first facility, we're going to do a big, what's called an AAR, after action report, with all the constituents, everybody who is involved. And you play a little game called Sustain, Improve. What worked great? What sucked? Stuff that worked great, we're going to do more of that. The stuff that sucked, we're going to do less of that. And then all those lessons learned get folded into Facility 2, and Facility 9, Facility 23, et cetera, et cetera. And we're going to keep doing this until we don't have to do it anymore and or I'm dead. And my goal is, and it has already, that this organization outgrows me. That when I'm dead, the mission doesn't stop. So that's the long-term strategic vision there. Now I'll tell you a real quick story as to why that's important. That first extract we did, we're finally in a location where we can breathe. If you were in class with me yesterday, we talked about hot zones, warm zones, and cool zones. And we'd gone from a hot zone to a warm zone. But I'm still standing there in a plate carrier holding a rifle. I'm on security and I'm watching this tree line and this road that's out here. I got 3 of the kids that we pulled out, 12, 13, 14, sitting on a stone fence behind me, and they're just intently watching me. You know that feeling when eyeballs are on you? Well, I've got 3 pairs of eyeballs burning a hole in my back. I could feel it through level 4 plates. So I turn around and I look at them and I said, "What's up? How can I help you?" And 2 of them wouldn't speak, couldn't speak, but the one young lady, strong kid, she says, "We want to know what we need to be when we grow up to do what you do." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Do we have to become cops? Do we go into the military? Should I become a firefighter? Like, what's the career path to end up at what you just did for us? How do we do that?" I'm like, "Sweetheart, whatever you want to do, you want to learn to fly fighter jets? I know a guy. You want to be a fireman, firewoman? I know somebody. You want to join special forces? I know somebody. You want to be a school teacher? We have connections. What do you want to do?" Like, we don't know. We want to do whatever we have to do to be able to do this. And I said, "Why?" And there was a young man sitting there who hadn't said a word yet. We're going on a week. This kid hadn't said a word. And he said, "Because I've still got friends back there and we need to go back and get them." And it broke my heart. But I realized there's not a better human being on planet Earth than those kids to be able to deal with this. Because they're the actual subject matter experts. They actually know what's happening. They actually understand the patterns of behavior. They understand the manipulation and the exploitation and the trauma and the multiple personality disorder and the DID. They understand all of that because they've lived it. And it really helped us codify what our mission is. I want to take that thing that could be a stumbling block for each individual person and turn it into a story of overcoming for them so that I can weaponize them for good. Because each one of those kids that we can put back together again statistically is 82 more kids that I don't have to put back together again. And they're going to be even better at it than I am. So that's what we do, who we are, and how we do it. How can you assist? I am terrible at shilling, regardless of what the haters on the internet say. I'm not going to tell you to donate. I'm not going to tell you to do anything unless the Spirit moves you to do it. Because I don't want to come into agreement with anyone that I'm not supposed to be in agreement with. Because the only reason we've made it as far as we have has been because of the Father. It's as simple as that. We have a website. It's Caleb with a K, calebhouse.org. You can go there. You can learn more about us. You can read our 990s, which are the tax filings that a nonprofit has to put out every year, so you can see how we spend our money, that we're not full of crap, and we don't have a bunch of expenses that we shouldn't have. We have a line item in our budget called hood rat shit. Let me explain what that means. That is field operations, because there's no other way to quantify what we do other than that. So if you see that, that's what that's about. We also need prayer. We do dangerous things regularly, and it's a calculated risk that every man and every woman on our teams takes every time they walk out the door. And They are putting their relationship with their wife and their children on the line so they can go do something for somebody they've never met before. The construction team needs prayers. The victim services teams need prayers. The board needs prayers. We are forced to make very difficult decisions pretty much daily. So keep us covered in prayer. If you want to come do cool stuff with us, visit the website, calebhouse.org. There is a process. You cannot just walk onto the property. You can our lives because we have caught 4 people trying to volunteer for us. Because bad people seek access and placement to hurt children, because 78% likely that hurt child is going to be trafficked twice, not once. And so once a kid has already been broken, I hate to use this analogy, but it's kind of like a horse. Much easier to ride a horse that's been broken. So there's a process to come be a part of what we do, and that's done to protect the kids and to protect our operators. If you're interested in that, go to calebhouse.org. And I will say this, I'll end with this. Whether I want to be or not, I am the face of this thing. And I receive a ton of borrowed credit from y'all. Bear, thank you so much for doing what you do at Caleb House. Please don't thank me. There are dozens of other people that are not standing here talking, that are actually doing this very moment, that you will never know their names. You can't. You won't know what they look like. You won't know what they do. They don't want you to know. They don't want to be on camera. They can't be on camera because of the nature of the work that they do. They'll never make a documentary about us. I'll never be on Netflix. Thank those people. When you pray over Caleb House, pray over those people. I'm just the guy that gets the camera pointed at him because I was the guy that had the YouTube channel when this whole thing started. I was already blown. People recognize me at the gas pump. It's weird. It makes it really difficult to operate. It's like, you're Bear from the internet. What are you doing here? Well, it's 3 a.m. and I'm wearing nods. What do you think I'm doing? Why are you up right now? So, while I appreciate the thanks, I appreciate the sentiment, it's not me, y'all. There's a whole team of people from the board on down to the volunteers at site who are just happy to spend their day sorting lumber that make this thing happen. I just get to be the face of it. So with that, thanks for coming.
You want to pray first, TJ?
Do I want to pray? What are we praying about?
Praying that everything's going to go smooth. I mean,
well, what a oh my gosh.
We've already had a hurdle. We've not got little power. So.
This is our passive solar home that we affordably built in 9 months for $39,000.
With one costly mistake.
Come on in and we'll show you around.
Welcome to my kitchen. It's where I spend most of the time, and it works very well. It is small, but it is very efficient, and to me that is very important in a kitchen, that you don't have to be moving from one corner to the other while you're working. It's just all right there, a few steps from each other, and you can get a lot done in a little bit of time. One thing I've learned from experience in our other house build is I had my kitchen on the south side of the house, and it was so bright and so hot, so I wanted it in the shade, so we did it on the north wall. That is something to keep in mind when you are building, is the location of like your main workspace, that it is a convenient place to work no matter what time of the day. This part of the kitchen is my main work station. On this side of the stove, we have just a small soapstone countertop, and that is so anytime I need to take a kettle off the stove, I have a place to put it that I don't have to worry about it burning the countertop without getting some kind of a hot pad, protection on the countertop. So that's the purpose of this soapstone here. And as far as the colors that we chose in here, our home is a Southwestern themed home. And I wanted not just bright aqua cabinets, but I wanted it kind of in that family. So I'm really pleased with this kind of blue-green color that it turned out. Our countertops are walnut. We got them from a friend up the road, and James cut them down and finished them off, and they are very, very beautiful. And I don't have any doors on my cabinets because doors are in the way. And people say, "Whoa, don't you have problems with them being messy all the time?" Not really. It's all right here, and it's very easy just to quick, rearrange it so it looks okay. But the overall efficiency of it, I like it. And I have no lack of storage space. I have 11 drawers here, and we put all drawers in our lowers instead of doors with shelves because it's just so much easier to see what's in your drawers. Here is my corner pantry, and the reason I love a corner pantry, if you have your cabinets come clear to the corner, it is a very inefficient use of your space. You have these lazy Susans, and they're just hard to get to, and you lose a lot of space. But when you make a pantry in the corner, you lose no space, and it's not that big. I mean, it's like so. But I have all kinds of storage in here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shelves. Yeah, just all my miscellaneous baking stuff and whatever else I want to store in there that I don't want anybody to see. Just come out and shut the door, and there it is. It can be messy in there and nobody knows the difference. Here we are at my island, and I have a commercial sink. I am in love with commercial sinks. I had one in my bus. This one has 2 sinks. My bus actually had 3. But being as I have a dishwasher, I decided I could get by with 2 sinks. But one of my real selling points that I love about my sink here is I have a cutting board here, and this is where I do all my prep work for my food, my meat, veggies, whatever, and it's very much easy cleanup. It's right in the sink, not on your countertop. And so that is what I really love about it. Concrete countertops here. James did that. He molded them or shaped them so all the water drains to the sink. I never have to worry about water coming off the sink. There are all kinds of dimensions of commercial sinks, different sizes, and I wanted just a certain size of sink, so we actually ended up ordering this one from Home Depot. We positioned our island like this. A triangular kitchen with this island on an angle makes the most efficient use of your space. Everything is close. My fridge is close, my stove is close, and so it makes it a very easy kitchen to work in. Another thing I love about this island is when I'm working here, I have these most amazing views, and that is very uplifting when you're doing the dirty work of doing your dishes. So from the other side of the sink is the bar here, and I like to have a bar on the outside of my kitchen so when my grandkids come over, they can sit on the bar and entertain me while I'm cooking, and James will sit here quite a bit and we'll talk while I'm in the kitchen. It's just a good social space to have. Coming in from my kitchen, there's the island, and then this cabinet here is our coffee bar. That's the main purpose of it, and numerous more drawers for cutlery, junk drawer, whatever. And then my dishes are here. Yeah, it's just a very nice place, and when I stumble in here in the mornings, my coffee is made already by my barista husband, and I look out the windows and enjoy the views, and it's just a very nice way to wake up in the morning.
We're in the living room now. The design here has to do with our views. So we got a lot of windows on the east and the south, and our views are beautiful. And that's why we arranged this area like we did. This coffee table comes from the house we built before, and this was the biggest log that we had from that house. I have my own sawmill. So all of the wood in here, I cut myself. This log was from the wood that I cut for the other house, and this was the largest piece, and I thought it was really cool. And so I saved it and made a coffee table out of it. And the bottom is actually beer kegs that I just cut in half and polished. And that's one cool thing about building Southwestern style. It's a little more rustic, so like cutting your own wood, it goes with that. So yeah, it all turns out cool. It's also very economical. So it's a cheap way to build. I'll say economical. It's not cheap, because if you would hire this done, it would be very expensive. But when you do it yourself, it's very inexpensive, but it does cost you labor. We're back over here by the pizza oven. I've built several of these. This is probably the 3rd or 4th pizza oven I've built. And this time I bought a kit. And the reason for that is the price of fire brick has really gone up over the last number of years, like a lot of things have. And this was the most economical way that I could do this, but also it was really fast. This also acts as a masonry heater, and this really gets interesting. So the reason I like a pizza oven for the base of my masonry heater is a pizza oven burns really, really efficient. They actually have their own catalytic converter in the pizza oven, and it's totally natural. So when you heat a pizza oven, when it gets to a certain point, the dome of your pizza oven gets hot to when it gets up to around 600 degrees, it does what they call flashes, and it burns off the soot off the dome of the pizza oven. Once it does that, all the smoke that hits that dome ignites. So it burns completely clean, 100%, well, it burns all your smoke. Every exhaust in a pizza oven is the front of the oven. So it burns across the dome, ignites the smoke, and then it comes out of the exhaust and goes up. Now above this, inside of this, there's a heat exchanger, and it's a 150-gallon stainless steel tank. And so this pipe goes into that tank, but it goes into the tank about halfway up in the tank. And then the exhaust out of the tank is at the bottom of the tank. This is all by design. So heat rises. And when the heat goes into that tank, the hottest air goes to the top of that tank and stays there. And then your coolest air is what exhausts out the bottom. And this is especially important after you get done burning. Let's say you burn your wood in the evening, you shut it down, you go to bed, and there will be air that gets into this and is being exhausted all the time. But it's always exhausting your coolest air instead of your hottest air. Your hottest air is going to stay at the top of that dome. And in masonry stove jargon, that's called a bell. So these bells are placed to hold the hottest air, and that way you're not exhausting the hottest air out of your base constantly. And the way I did this one, I bricked this all up and then stuccoed it. But before I got done bricking with just a little gap at the top, I actually filled this all up with sand. So there's about 12,000 pounds worth of sand inside of this. Well, the whole thing has about 12,000 pounds of mass. So when you burn this, it burns really efficient because you burn it wide open. You never choke it back. You never have creosote. It burns up in there, but your heat is stored in that sand. So this heat will last for days. It's really a cool concept. It's been used for years and years in Northern Europe. Russia especially, in fact, it has the name a Russian fireplace. That's how this whole system works. I know it's a little bit complicated, but if you want to look it up, you can look it up. Masonry stoves, heat storage, Russian fireplaces, bells of Russian fireplaces. It gives you the concepts that I used in this. We were living in a bus for the last probably 4 years, 3 years, and we thought we would be traveling. And the closer it got to traveling, the more we realized that we didn't want to travel. We are not Rolling Stones, and that's fine for anybody that wants to do that, but we decided we wanted to stay here. So we bought this piece of property. We have this house on 35 acres. Different states are different, but here in Colorado, you have to have at least 35 acres to have what they call a domestic well. If it's smaller than 35 acres, you can only get a permit for what they call an in-house well, and that's exactly what that means. You cannot water your lawn, you can't have animals outside, you can't have anything outside of your house. It's only in the house. And we paid right at $100,000 for this 35 acres. Then we had to drill a well, and that was what, about $15,000, something in that price range, I think.
17, I think it was.
Okay, $17,000. That was the only real expense we had as far as buying the property and the well. We moved to Colorado because our daughter lived in the area. This is one thing I do recommend when you are looking for a piece of property. It's best to move into the area and live there, which is what we did. We moved here and rented a place for a year, and we shopped for property. We did not buy the first place that we saw. We started looking in this area, and really it was almost by chance that we found the place that we bought. It was
The first place that we bought before this one.
That was the lot just to the south of here. It was for sale, but it didn't look like much from the road. And so I was out there walking across it, and when I hit the rocks kind of at the back of the place, I called Doreen and I told her, this is the place. This is the perfect place to build a house. And we built that place, lived in it. We owned that property for around 13 years. And this property was just to the north of it. And we just got very fortunate. We made an offer on this place, and the man that we bought it from was needing to sell just at the time when we needed to buy. And so, yeah, we just happened to get this property at the right time. We built this house for around $39,000.
Is that including the concrete mistake? So when we were building pouring the floor, we made a $3,000 mistake that we didn't do our homework on. We had the concrete company put colorant in the concrete, brown. We had them do it, and we found out later that James could have bought it off of Amazon for like $300, and they charged us $3,000 for it.
Well, the reason we made the mistake on that is we built a small cabin. When we had the concrete delivered on that, it was a very, very small amount. I never realized how much it was costing me, but here's the thing you need to realize. This is done all the time in sales, and that is they make their money on add-ons. So the basic product, concrete, is really quite economical. Anytime you add on, just like colorant in your concrete, that's where they make their money. You need to be careful with that. We could have built this house for $36,000 without that. It's very economical, I realize. But if you're gonna build like that economically, you have to do your homework. You don't just start building and then gather your material. Come up with your plan and then plan on gathering your material over a period of time and then start building. Because when you build this way, if you're gonna build economical, when you need something is not the time to start shopping for it. Shop for your stuff, store it, and then build. And another thing that does for you, it helps you when you're building on how you build to utilize the cheap material that you've bought.
But one thing to be aware of when you build like this, it is more labor intensive. James asked me over and over, why do I do things that is so, it takes so much work to do? I said, well, because it's cheap. So, it is more labor intensive when you collect your stuff like that than when you just go to the Home Depot and buy everything nice and new and ready to use and puts together easily. This was definitely more work.
It took us about 8 or 9 months to build this, and that was Doreen and I doing 90% of the work. We did have help with a few of the things that were really labor intensive that needed a lot of hands. Relationships are important. You need friends. And our friends are glad to come over and help us. We go and help them. And yeah, it took about 8 or 9 months. As far as what this house costs to live in, this is a passive solar, so we have no heating expense at all.
No electricity. The sun provides all our energy.
Really the only expense we have is our gas bill, which is around $85 a month. The property tax here is around $1,500 a year. So that's really the only expense we have as far as just out-of-the-pocket expense to live here. Of course, we got our groceries and things like that, but as far as a house, actually living here, it's very, very economical. Another real important part of living in the area that you're thinking of building on is the local codes, your codes and your restrictions. If you're going to be in an HOA, we actually live in an HOA, how they operate, your county and its zoning laws, all of that is important. You can buy a piece of property and be surprised with a lot of different things. And there's a lot of homework goes into this. So don't just buy a piece of property and think you're going to build your dream, because your dream might collide with the zoning laws, and that's never pleasant. So just be careful. And again, this is why it's so important to live in an area, talk to the locals, make friends, talk to people that have done what you're thinking about doing. They are a wealth of information. This thing of independence is kind of a joke. None of us can really make it on our own. We need people in our lives and people that know what they're doing, people that have gone before us, and they can help us a lot. So yeah, make friends, move into an area, live there for a year. It'll help you a lot. So this is a desk area, and we are not quite done with this area. Eventually, we're going to have bookshelves here on the wall. This is just a piece of walnut that I bought off a neighbor, and it turned out cool. It's got this little hole in the top that works great to run your cords through so you don't have to drill your own hole. And also I'm going to eventually put a bank of drawers there on that side. All in all, it turned out really great. This is a beautiful piece of wood, and I think we're really going to enjoy it.
Okay, this is our little dining area. We just wanted a small table here that we could sit out while we eat our meals and enjoy the lovely views. Also, we didn't want just a square table. We bought this wood from our friend, and James cut it in wedges, and then we just kind of worked with it to make an organic shape. You can actually seat around 5 or 6 people around this small space, so it works pretty good. And then another thing I like about this spot in our windows, we have a little wider window sills. We use Saltillo tiles, and they're great for setting on. Another thing with our windows, they are just plain clear glass. These are double pane windows, but you do not want the low E glass that they put in most houses everywhere because that reflects the sunshine. So it's for helping keep your house cool, but it's not good for heating your house. You just want the clear, plain glass, old-fashioned glass windows. I love the curve that is here in this corner. It breaks up the squareness of the house. In a small house, you need more details, and it's just a lovely place to have my plants.
So this is the back part of the house. This is our dressing area, also utility room. We have our clothes storage here, bathroom behind me, closet there. Yeah, just a multi-function room. And when you build small, of course, everybody that has done this knows this. You have to use your spaces for more than one thing, and that's what this space is. Yeah, it works very, very well. We really enjoy this space. Whenever you separate your spaces out, just like the washer and dryer here, if you would enclose this, it makes your space feel smaller. And by leaving it open, it makes your space feel bigger. And there's trade-offs. You will see the washer and dryer in here. And some people don't like that. You have to decide what's the most important to you and then just roll with that. We like it more open. We like the more expansive feel. And so that's why we have it like we do. We got onto this in our bus. And when you're in a very small space like a bus, you have to be very efficient with your space. And we really fell in love with these open compartments. What it does is separate your clothes into sections, makes it very organized. Another thing I like is you can see it. So there's no guessing what you have here, and you can just easily pick which color, which pants, which shirt. Yeah, it's very quick. We like it. It's very efficient. I custom built this. These are just pieces of plywood with little strips nailed on the side. And then I have a friend that has a cabinet shop. He actually put the facing on these pieces, and these are just simple little 1/2-inch pieces of melamine. It's a very simple design, very easy, very fast to build, and very inexpensive. It was great. We're over here by the vanity. I am not done with this. I'm going to put a mirror here on the wall and also the light fixture. But the cool thing about this is the top. This technique is called Tadillac. It's a Moroccan technique, and it's really cool. If you look it up and you would actually buy material to do this, it would be expensive. And if you would hire it done, it'd be very, very expensive. But when you do it yourself and you just use off-the-shelf stuff, it's very inexpensive, very cheap. I made this sink just out of plywood, and then I lined it, the whole thing with Schluters, which is what you put in showers. And then I started with my Tadillac top. So it's hydrated lime and sand. You mix that together and you just trowel it on. And you put several coats of that on. And then to finish it is really unique. You actually use soap. I made my own soap. I made olive oil soap, and then you emulsify that in water, and then you just brush it on. And it ends up really, really cool. I didn't realize this, but homemade soap like that actually has a certain portion of wax in it. And that soaks into the lime plaster, and it has a chemical reaction. It makes this stuff completely waterproof. And I'm sorry you can't feel this because the feel is really cool. It's got a real waxy feel to it, but it turned out looking really cool, I think. So I made my shower out of slate. This would have been very expensive if I would have just gone to the store and bought it. But I had a friend that had a stack of this slate. It was actually a whole pallet full that I'd seen in his backyard for quite some time. So when I got ready to build this, I contacted him to see if I could get some off him, and he was glad to get rid of it. So bought it for $100 and installed it. So turned out really cool. When you're going to build inexpensive, you have to be looking for those kind of bargains. So keep your eyes peeled when you get in your friend's backyard. We tried to keep a feel throughout the house. This house is built with natural products throughout. This is natural stone, and it just all fits together. And for a good house design, that's what you want to do. You want to make sure and keep a certain theme throughout. And I feel like this shower answers that. Our house is off-grid. We have used composting toilets through the years for different applications. But in the county we live in, you must have a septic tank installed before you can get a building permit. So we have a septic tank, and this is a regular flush toilet. And those of you that live in town, you would think this is kind of strange, but this is the first flush toilet we've had for quite a few years. The people that visit us that aren't used to the more hippie ways, they're glad for this. But yeah, it's okay. But we still like our composting toilet pretty good.
Here's our bedroom. I painted the walls dark, decided to do that in contrast with all the light colors in all the other rooms, and I love the dark walls in here. Another thing I love about our room is the big windows. It is amazing when you're laying in bed and look out at the stars at night. It is really, really beautiful. And to wake up to the sunrise is really gorgeous also. Another thing I like about laying in bed, you look up at the ceiling and see the warm beams, the dark beams in contrast to the lighter ceiling. It creates a really nice ambience in here. Our bedroom is really very minimalistic. We only have a bed in here. And right now our bed is on the floor. Eventually we will get a platform built maybe 16 inches off of the floor. We'll have storage under there. Oh, another thing of interest is the wall sconces in here. James made those, and they cast a really nice glow in the evening when we have them on. Yeah, this is a really nice, warm bedroom space that we really do enjoy.
I want to tell you about these roof beams. These are spruce beams. The University of Alaska has a span table for round wood for poles. So these are designed according to their tables for our snow load. And actually, our snow load here is 50 pounds per square foot. And this roof has 100 pound per square foot design. So it wasn't like we just threw a dart at a dartboard and picked the logs. These are actually using a span table just like you would for any lumber that you would use. I put them on my sawmill and just flattened the top. By flattening them, it gives you a good flat surface to put your ceiling on, but also an easy place to take your measurements, like for notching into your walls and things like that. It gives you a good place to measure off of. So that's how I did that. Then I cut my ceiling boards also, and they are ponderosa pine. So we got some variation in the color of the ceiling, but it really turned out beautiful. All the other wood in here I also cut. The beams on the windows and the uprights, they're all Doug fir. So we have 3 different species of wood in here. We have Doug fir, spruce, and ponderosa pine. And then I'm going to talk about the floor. We really like concrete floors. First of all, they're economical. You pour your floor, and that's your finished floor. Like I said earlier, we made a mistake on this. We did have them color the concrete, which is very expensive. We could have done it ourselves for a lot less, but we colored it dark because of the solar gain. And this house works together with the windows. And the way this works is the sun shines in on the floor, heats the floor up during the day, and the floor gets to around, 95 degrees during the day, and then it radiates that heat out at night. But under the floor, this floor is about 5 inches thick, and under the floor we have 2 inches of insulation. And that's critical for a passive solar house, because if you don't do that, you'll lose all your heat into the ground. The walls are also concrete. They're just block that we stacked and then poured full of concrete. And all of that absorbs the heat from the sun during the day, and that's all part of a good passive solar design. Now the floor, as far as a finish, I actually concocted my own finish, and it turned out working really good. Some of those things, those experiments are fails, but this one was a success. And it's just linseed oil and paint thinner, and then a little beeswax and a little carnauba wax, and mix those together, heated them up. And right after we poured the floor, I went over and put my finish on the floor and just dumped it on the floor, kind of like just spread it out, and then used a squeegee and just squeegeed it out. And it was real fast. It probably took me, I don't know, an hour or two to finish the whole floor. And then when we got done building and we're finishing in here, I went back over it with buffing pads and buffed it, and it turned out really great. I can't say that about all my experiments, but this one turned out great. Our house here, we built out of a stucco block. You start out by stacking the block dry, put rebar in that, and then poured it full of concrete. Outside of that is styrofoam, and then on the exterior, it's stucco. One of the things we did is, you can see the sills are all copper. The reason I did that, it gives it kind of a classy touch. Most of the time, houses that have copper trim on them are very expensive homes, and I just thought it would be cool to do an inexpensive home with copper trim. The other thing we did is the black on that is not paint. That's a technique called shosugibon. It's a Japanese technique where you actually burn the wood and then you go back and put oil on it. And it's very good in this locale because it resists UV rays, and it's a very durable finish. In fact, the oldest wooden building in the world that's the way it's finished. It's in Japan, and the finish is a burned finish like that. We did color our stucco before we put it on, so that is more than skin deep. It's the depth of the stucco. So all in all, I think it's a very durable, very nice home. Turned out looking nice. The curve, it's visual. It's something that gives your house a look that kind of does away with just the old square block. This house is, on the outside, it's 32 feet square, and it's just a square box. But when you put those curves on, it gives it a little detail that kind of knocks at that look. So yeah, that's why we put them on. Inside they look cool, outside they look cool, but they also cut down on the wind noise, because most of your whistling comes from a house. The corners is where most of your noise comes from wind. As far as the maintenance is concerned, this is probably the lowest maintenance house you could build. With the wood burnt, it will never need to be painted. With the seals copper, that should never need any repairs at all. The stucco is good for 50, 60 years, and then the roof is tin, and that should last a long time. So I don't expect any maintenance at all in our lifetime. When you design a house, sometimes when you get in it, you think, well, this we would have changed, that we would have changed. On this job, I would say it's as close to perfect as we could have gotten. We just really, really enjoy this house. One thing we have learned, I believe, in this build, which we continue to learn, we've been married for 46 years now?
Almost.
We've learned to trust each other with the things that the other person is good at. We work together quite well as a team. I learned that a lesson again on this project. I just let my wife do the things that I'm not good at, and it sure does lower my stress.
Yeah, I would say too, with every build that we have done together, that I've learned to trust him more. He goes fast, but when it's all said and done, it turns out looking really, really good. We've learned to work together quite well, I'd say.
A lot of people do not realize how much work it actually is. And you're going to be weary, bodily weary. It's kind of like running a marathon. It's not the first mile, second mile. You got to run the whole full marathon. It's not going to be easy, and there are going to be times when you question whether it was a smart thing to do, but you'll get there. And don't look at the whole project. You've only got to accomplish one little, but as you accomplish one little thing at a time, lo and behold, a house gets built. We want to thank you all for watching our video. We hope it inspired you. Maybe someday you'd like to build your own.
Hey, y'all have a good day.
Hey guys, so this video is about repelling snakes from a specific area in your yard. Now, if you have a very large yard, this may be impractical, but if you're trying to just keep snakes away from a very confined area, this can be a very doable thing. I'm going to give you some different recipes from homemade items that will keep snakes repelled or at bay. And after a rain, you may have to reapply it, but I'm going to also go around my own yard and show you some things that you need to change the habitat for the snakes and things that you must do to make it inhospitable for a snake to take up residence in your yard. So let's first do that by going around the yard, and I'll show you different things that need to be done to keep snakes from not even wanting to come to your yard, especially the toxic ones. So guys, rule number one is keep your grass cut to below 3 inches at all times, because snakes prefer to kind of slither through grasses looking for insects or other prey. So it's a great place for them to have cover from predators, possibly any type of bird that might swoop in and make a meal out of them. So just remember, if your grass is cut lower, that's going to keep the snake populations down naturally, because there's no cover in a short cut lawn at about 2.5 inches. Now, I recently redid a fence area, and this is the old fencing that came down. Some of it might be recycled and reused, and some of it maybe end up in the burn pile for ashes for non-edible plants. But one thing to remember is you don't want to leave piles of lumber, rocks, any type of material or unused equipment. You want to get rid of it. An old lawnmower sitting behind a shed is a perfect place for a snake to take up residence. So you remember, you want to make it as inhospitable as possible, and no hiding places for any type of predators. So if they feel exposed, the snake will leave on its own, knowing that there's no place for them to start a family and multiply in that area. So recently I built this trash can cover, and it's just a little area where we keep our trash cans. But one thing that's really important to remember is that whatever type of trash can you have, make sure it is lidded, and that things like rodents and insects can't easily get access to it, because that is the prey snakes are going to be looking for. So you just want to make sure that you keep lids on outdoor trash cans at all times, because the rodents and insects come in and the snakes will follow right behind them. So that's a great idea, to have lids on all trash cans. Now, snakes are very good at finding cool places to kind of nest and kind of get away from the possible predators that may attack them. And unsealed bottom garage door areas are a prime area for them to get inside your garage. So after this happened once to us, I installed some plastic specifically made for garage doors. So when it comes down, it makes a really tight seal, kind of oval shaped, and then as the garage door compresses, it kind of flattens out. So a little hard to see here, I know, but this is what keeps rodents and snakes from getting into my garage. Now, I know this is a little bit harder to see from a distance, but this is a condensation drain from an AC system, and what I've done is I've dug down around it, put in some gravel on top, and below that some sand, so all the moisture that comes out of this quickly goes into the ground and dissipates, so you don't have a standing wet area. It's a little wet now because we've had just day after day of rain, but this dries out very quickly, and that way it won't attract insects, it won't attract rodents, which ultimately attracts snakes to that area. So just make sure that if you have any type of drains draining outside, like your AC condensation piping, make sure that it drains into an area that drains quickly and doesn't create standing water. So I know this is a little harder to see. We're under the deck, so it's a little darker back in here, but where a lot of the power lines, the lines going out to my heat pump are, they go in right here. And I wanted to make sure I sealed this properly, so I stuffed it first with a lot of steel wool, and then I sprayed expanding foam around it. You can see a little bit here on the outer edge. Also, I put some of the same thing a little bit further around the perimeter of where the dryer comes out, and also I put a special mesh in there to keep any larger rodents from coming in. I can't completely stop this up because I don't want to clog the outflow of air, and it could also catch a lot of the lint that comes out, so we want to make sure that it still has good airflow. I'm about to replace this with a very special type of dryer exhaust there. I should have done this a long time ago, but I'll put a link in the description. It opens and closes automatically once you cut off your clothes dryer, and it prevents any rodents or anything else from crawling into your washer dryer of your home. So take a look down below if you want to see that link and get one for yourself. Pretty easy to install as well. Now, this Rose of Sharon is a perfect example of what you need to do with your shrubs. You need to prune them up about 12 inches off the ground. Any lower limbs that are coming out, anything that's growing under there, you need to clean it out because it provides a perfect place for snakes to hide and populate and repopulate. So just remember, any type of shrubbery, you need to cut it back at the very base up to about 12 inches. Now, we just had a rainstorm come through and this is looking a little bit worse for wear, but the blooms are so heavy on it is just falling over. About 2 weeks ago, this was all standing up perfect. But just remember, when it comes to shrubs around your house, you want to prune them back 12 inches above the ground. Also, another good idea is to prune your shrubs about 24 inches away from the house so it doesn't provide a bridge for a snake, because snakes can climb. They can climb up into a shrub and find their way further up into your house and possibly make it inside through a window. So just remember, shrubbery needs to be well maintained around your home. Now this is most likely the home of a small mole or vole or possibly tiny little chipmunk or ground squirrel, and they will often make these holes in your lawn. You want to make sure that you keep them out of your yard because they're the perfect food for any type of snake almost, unless they're into eating insects. But just remember, you want to seal these. If there's no fresh soil around it, you know this may be quite old, maybe they've moved on and maybe they're not even using it, but putting a little bit of concrete in it, maybe about half a cup down in there, and add a little bit of moisture, it will seal it and it will become rock hard and no animals can get in or out without digging a new hole around the outer edges. So if there is something living in there, it can still burrow its way out. You just want to make sure that no snake decides to take up residence in these type of holes, because they will do that. Now this type of mesh is perfect. It comes in a roll. It's perfect for keeping snakes out of your yard because you can plant this in the ground at the base of your fence, long roll, so you don't have to buy small squares like this, but you're going to be planting it or burying it about 6 inches underground right at the base of your fence. Now at the top of your fence, because snakes can climb, you can bend this out about 30 degrees, and as they try to climb over it, there'll be one climbing kind of at an unusual angle, and they'll sometimes drop back down. But the edges of these types of meshes are kind of sharp, and it's kind of uncomfortable for a snake to climb over. So is it possible they could still get over it? Yes, but it's unlikely with that sharp edge. So make sure if you do use this type of mesh edging, make sure it's kind of unpleasant for them to try to climb over it, so it kind of has a sticky feel to it. Might keep them out of your fenced area already. But just remember, this stuff can be bought in a long roll. If they still sell it online, which I'm not sure, I'll see if I can find it, but something this heavy and this large would be kind of cost prohibitive to have it shipped to you. So you may want to go to your local hardware store and just ask for 1/4 inch stainless steel mesh. Now I wanted to drop back to something I said earlier about the dryer vent and the expanding foam. The one I used was the very old-fashioned kind. It's been in that same spot for well over a decade. But some of the newer expanding foams are darkers, like blacks and browns. So if you don't want that visibility where you can see the expanding foam, and there's kind of an area where a lot of people could see it, you can use a dark expanding foam where it won't be quite so visible and kind of stand out and not look so great. So also around your doors and windows, you want to make sure you're using the proper sweeps at the base, any type of weather stripping. You just want to make sure there's no opening, because snakes can really squeeze into a very flat area, just a couple of quarters high, US quarters, and they can that would probably be about 2 millimeters, I guess I should say. But anyways, they can squeeze in under doors and windows very easily. So you just want to make sure you go around your house and seal all those possible entry points, because you definitely don't want a poisonous snake finding its way into your garage, your basement, or even in your living area. Now I'm going to give you several different recipes as far as snake repellents go. And snakes have a very good sense of smell. If you've ever seen a snake sticking out its tongue, it's smelling the environment around it. It's trying to detect predators or prey. And so they do have a very good sense of smell. And there's a lot of debate as to whether a snake can be repelled by strong odors. But if you read the reviews in some of these products, you'll find that there's a lot of people that are very happy with the results. So I'll just say that first. So let's get started with the first recipe. Now this is super simple. I'm going to give you multiple recipes, but if you happen to have cayenne pepper or cayenne powder, you need a gallon of water. You can use either regular liquid dish soap like Dawn, or even better would be Castile soap. It's a little harder to find, but I'll put links to them below if you don't have a market in your area that sells Castile soap. It's the most natural soap you can buy. What you want to do is you want to put this out and you want to spray it. You can use one of these solo sprayers. You'll just kind of fan spray about a 12-inch wide barrier. Now this is going to be hard if you have a really large yard, so I'll give you an option for that as well. But you'll spray whatever area you're trying to keep snakes out of it, whether it's a play area for kids or a barbecue area around your back deck area. Spraying this concoction will really help. You want to boil the water with a cayenne pepper so it dissolves perfectly in your water, and you can keep it stored for quite a while. Then when you're ready to spray it, put it in your sprayer and add about 1 to 2 tablespoons of whatever type of soap you have handy, and then spray it in a 12-inch wide perimeter around whatever area you want to repel the snakes out of. Now this next product I found online, I've used it many times for mosquitoes in our seating areas, but the smell of this is so strong, it smells like you're inside of a pizzeria, but it is garlic oil. It's something like 93% garlic oil, citric acid, and I believe there's a third ingredient. It's more in an inert ingredient, but by purchasing some of this mosquito barrier, not only will keep mosquitoes away, but you can create that 12-inch wide band around whatever area you're trying to keep snakes away from, and the smell is incredibly strong. Now, like the last recipe as well as this recipe, this is not waterproof. Once you have a heavy rain come in, you'll need to reapply this to the area. But if you're having an upcoming barbecue or you have a kid's play area, you can do it every time you know that they're going to be out there on the weekends maybe playing. You're going to take 1/4 cup of this mosquito barrier. I'll put a link down below if you don't have any in your local stores. And then you're going to put that 1/4 cup in 1 gallon of water. And again, you can use your solo sprayers to go around the perimeter, whatever area you're trying to protect and flush snakes away from. Just do it, like I said, that 12-inch wide band is really critical because it really needs to have a strong smell. After I sprayed this, the following day we went back to the seating area and my wife commented on how incredibly strong the garlic smell was even 24 hours later. So this is a different recipe using the cayenne pepper. You're going to take equal parts of cayenne pepper, garlic powder, and or onion powder. You can use both. And then sulfur, powdered sulfur. Mix all these together, and if you have a handheld pump type duster, that would be great. Make sure you're wearing a mask because this combination that gets into your sinus, you will regret it. So just make sure that you use all safety equipment like glasses and breathing apparatus that will filter out any of that dust that's going to come right into your lungs. Mix all this together, like I said, in equal parts, and put down a 12 to 24-inch barrier around your barbecue grill area where kids are playing, and just make sure it's not where they're going to come in contact with it, but just kind of out in the outer perimeter area. And this dry powder has an incredibly strong smell. As a snake approaches it, they're going to be repelled very quickly from this really, really strong odor. Obviously, again, this is going to have to be reapplied after a heavy rainfall. Light rain, maybe not, but after a heavy rain, I'm thinking you're going to need to reapply it. Now this next recipe is if you're just needing to treat a very small area, but you take clove and cinnamon oil, 1 tablespoon each of these, mix it with some warm water, and then you can use your solo sprayer just to do a perimeter spray about 12 inches all the way around. I can tell you that this has a very potent smell, but again, after a heavy rain, you'll need to reapply it. But these are all great for just a weekend activity if you're afraid of any snakes that might be in that area. But I can tell you that a lot of people say mothballs. Well, technically, you could do that, but it's illegal to use mothballs in an outdoor setting. It's considered an off-label usage. So there's a federal law that says whatever is considered a pesticide, and that is kind of a pesticide because it has some pest-killing properties and chemicals in it. If you use that outside, it could be a problem. Now, if you're putting it in a confined building, under a shed, under a greenhouse, then you're probably going to be okay because it's not out in the open. But I would say, remember that if you have heard about putting that around your home, and it's not cheap, each one of those boxes is a few dollars at least, even at the dollar store. So just remember that if you do that, you want to put that in a confined area up under metal buildings or greenhouses, that if you think you have snakes in that area, that would definitely help. Now, one thing you have to remember is that snakes follow their prey or their food, and if you have a rodent problem anywhere around your home, they're going to be not too far behind if you're seeing rodents. So you want to make sure that you make it very difficult for rodents to live around your home. I've got a kitchen recipe that you can use to get rid of rodents, and I'll put that video right here. Also, some snakes actually eat a lot of insects, so I've got another video that involves baking soda, and I'll put that link right here for getting rid of many, many different types of insects around your home, which would be like a magnet for the snake to come in and start taking up residence and reproducing, and before you know it, you've got an entire family of snakes feeding off of the rodents and insects. Now, we're all guilty of doing this if we have outdoor pets, and never ever ever leave pet food outside overnight. First of all, the rodents and roaches and other insects will just be drawn to it very quickly, and again, anywhere you have those, you're going to be drawing in snakes as well. So just make sure that if you do have outdoor pets, you bring their food and secure it inside overnight, because it's just one of those things that one thing leads to another when it comes to snakes. So just an ounce of prevention will keep the snakes away. So I'm going to give you the number one thing I think that draws snakes into your yard, and a lot of people do this. They don't realize that this causes snakes, but before I do, I will put links in the description for all the possible things that you can use. If you don't want to make your own formula, there's a lot of snake repellents out there that have extremely strong sulfur kind of based products. So take a look down there if you don't want to make your own. But the number one thing that people do is they put up bird feeders close to areas where they can watch the birds. Birds are a natural food source for snakes, and if you have a lot of birds coming in, you're going to have a lot of snakes coming in too. I remember we have a screened porch, and all of our cats were just mesmerized on the bird feeder, but there was no birds out there at that moment, and I thought that was really kind of odd. But as I went closer, there was a tree that was reaching our second floor screened deck, and I looked as close as I could, and I saw a snake was hiding in that bush just waiting for a bird to come in so it could devour it. So just remember, if you are feeding birds, make sure the bird feeder is extremely high up and far away from any areas where you have activity such as sitting areas, barbecue grills, or children's play areas. Now, there is one exception to my dislike of snakes, and a couple weeks ago our cats again were looking off our second floor screen deck. They were just staring at a little area of ivy we have growing near a back door area, and I kept watching it very closely because I knew they saw something. And the outdoor cats we have just decimated the population of small rodents out there. There's no ground squirrels, no chipmunks, no rodents. They're never out there. And the birds, they stay off of the ground area because they know there's cats out there. But anyways, I looked closer and a snake stuck his head out from that ivy, and I knew right away it was not a toxic or poisonous snake based upon its skin pattern. I'll put a picture in the description of this exact snake, but it is a king snake. And a king snake, my dad told me many years ago when I was probably 4 or 5, king snakes were actually good because they kill and take care of any venomous and poisonous snakes you might have. So they're natural enemies, and they control the worst of the worst. In my entire life, I've only seen one rattlesnake in our area, and that was on a hiking trail in the state park. And I can tell you, I am very frightened of rattlesnakes just from their reputation. Now I wanted to give you a look at this predator right here. It is not a real predator, it's just a plastic predator, but this particular owl I bought many years ago, and it had a very unusual feature to it. Occasionally, just at random times during the day, the head will turn and it will give the image of being a live owl. That in itself can scare snakes away, it can scare other birds away, it can scare rodents away. So if they still sell these, I'll look and see. I don't think so. This was kind of an unusual one-off item I bought, so I'm not sure if they even sell them anymore. But plastic owls and things like that, the herons you see, having them around the yard will definitely help with flushing away rodents and small birds, and hence that will keep the snakes away as well. So guys, I understand snakes are part of the ecosystem. They play a role in nature. I understand that, but when it comes to my little piece of nature, I'd rather they just stay out of my yard and maybe they can go somewhere else. But I do have some lightly wooded areas completely all around me. I have a wet weather stream, and so snakes used to be more common than they are now, but some of the measures I've taken have really cut down on their population. I don't mind king snakes and I don't mind the small green snakes, but when it comes to poisonous or toxic snakes, I absolutely don't want those anywhere in the yard, and they could also bite one of our outdoor pets. So guys, I really appreciate you watching. If you have a question about this video or any previous video, I hope you'll become a public subscriber first. So guys, we are more than halfway through the gardening season, and I'm bringing a ton of produce into the kitchen, and so there's one thing that always pops up every year. It's almost unavoidable, and that is fruit flies and also gnats. But I'm going to show you multiple traps. products that you already have in your kitchen and ways to get rid of those fruit flies and gnats is super simple. It's really easy to make, and it's 100% effective. You won't see a single fly, fruit fly or gnat around your kitchen. So let's go into the kitchen. I'll show you how to make this right after I finish collecting all of these fruits, vegetables, and peppers. So guys, this is just today's harvest. This isn't a multi-day harvest, and the garden is producing so much right now, mainly from some of the methods I use in other videos. So if you'll take a look at the library, I think you'll see one of these methods you can try yourself, and it works incredibly well. But this, like I say, is what I brought in today, but a lot of people don't realize, but when you bring in produce from the outside, you're also bringing in the eggs of insects that have laid their eggs on the outside of each piece of produce, and you don't realize it, but within a very short amount of time, you'll have a kitchen filled with fruit flies and small gnats, and this is where it comes from, directly from your garden. And if you think the grocery store is any different, it's the same thing in the grocery store, especially this culprit right here, the banana. It is probably brings in more insects into people's home than anything else, so bananas are not exempt from that. But there's a simple trick you can do to preventing this. But let's say you already have an infestation. I'll show you 5 different traps that you can create, and I'm almost guarantee you have at least one of these, a few of these items to make one of these traps in your kitchen already. So let's go through each trap and I'll show you how to make it, and then I'll show you how to protect yourself from fruit flies, gnats, and things like that from the vegetables in the safest possible way. So before I show you the 5 different types of traps for fruit flies and gnats, there's something you need to do with produce as you bring it inside. You need to make sure that you wash it, but not just in lukewarm water. You need to use something like a Castile soap. This is one of the purest forms of soap you can use, and it's one of the safest. It's actually made from vegetable fats, so that's one of the things that you can use. Also, if you don't have the Castile soap, you could use something like Johnson's baby shampoo. And then lastly, if you do have this product, this is called Dawn Free and Clear, but I would only use a teaspoon on these 2 products and use a full tablespoon on the Castile soap. So if you don't wash your fruits and vegetables first, that's when you'll come out with a really bad infestation of the fruit flies or gnats. So just make sure you do that first. It's critically important because you need to kill any of the eggs or wash them away that are on the outside of any fruits or vegetables. That really becomes true with bananas and apples. They seem to have the most fruit flies and eggs on the outside of the skin area. Now the first of the 5 traps is super simple. You only need 1 main ingredient, and depending on what you have around your house, you may or may not have it, but apple cider vinegar is your best bet. Fruit flies are attracted to the smell of fermented vinegar, so use that. We're going to show you how to put this together. Super simple. You either need cling wrap or you need a gallon-sized freezer bag, and I actually prefer the gallon-sized freezer bag, and I'll show you real quick why I do. It's a lot easier. Once you put the apple cider vinegar into your bowl, just be very careful because it's so easy to spill out of the bowl. So let's do that first. You only need just maybe 1 ounce in your bowl because the smell is going to attract them to it. We're going to, and it is absolutely strong. From the second I poured it, I could absolutely smell it quickly. So we're going to put that into our gallon-size freezer bag. You don't have to seal the top because we're going to use a rubber band right here. Put the rubber band around the outside of the bowl. That's going to make it really tight. Now, with cling wrap, this next step is a little bit more difficult, but I find that using the gallon freezer bag, because the plastic is thicker, it makes the holes a lot easier. You can't just poke the hole and move on because sometimes the holes are too small for the fruit flies to get in. So once you poke the holes, twist it like that so they'll have enough room to get inside. If it's too small, they won't be able to get into the bowl. So I would say about maybe 5 to 10 holes, just circle right like that. And I'll give you an up close on the camera how large these holes are, but they're larger than the diameter of a toothpick because you have to have it at the right size for the fruit flies to make it inside. So the smell of the fermented vinegar, the apple cider vinegar will come out and will attract the fruit flies to it. If this doesn't work, we have 4 other options you can use to get rid of fruit flies around the house. And there's really a critical place that fruit flies will lay their eggs that you would never think of. But again, this is step number 1, and it's usually very effective, but let's move on to trap number 2. Now the next trap involves any type of alcohol, any type of red wine, white wine. You could use beer, you could even use kombucha, but what we're going to do is use a very small container Again, maybe about 1 ounce. The reason I'm going down in container size is I want it to be able to cover the entire base of it without using a lot of the wine or beer or anything like that. Exact same process. We're going to put it into the plastic bag, and again use the exact same rubber band type method. Put it around there like that, poke the holes, and make sure you expand each hole. So any type of fermented beer, wine, alcohol, this works great as well, and sometimes it actually works better because it mimics the smell of rotting fruit. So if you don't have the apple cider vinegar, you do have some beer, alcohol, wine, kombucha, any type of fermented drink, this will attract them even faster. I find that plum wine works best for me, so that's what I had in the fridge. I also like to consume it myself, so I always have a little bit on hand. So let's say you don't have apple cider vinegar or any type of fermented beverage. You can use the fruit itself. This is an overripe banana, so we just take it, take some of the skin, we want to chop it up, cut it up into smaller pieces. And we're going to use the exact same method, but since we don't have the first two products, we're just going to put that in a little bit of water. Before you put the fruit in, put in a little bit of dish soap. I'm using the same Castile soap, and this will spread across the top, but it's a good idea to do a little bit of stirring, kind of mix it there, and then put in your fruit. Do the same thing with your bag. And this rotting fruit, a lot of times it's where your fruit flies, again, as I said earlier, started from. So it's something that's going to attract them naturally. So they absolutely love the smell of overripe fruit, rotting fruit, and it's where they come to lay their eggs. So let's do the same exact procedure, punching about 5 or 6 holes inside of our Ziploc bag. And they'll come in as that releases an odor, it'll bring them right to us. So rotting fruit or overripe vegetables, anything that is going to put off that specific type of odor will definitely bring them right to the trap. So again, you want to put this close to any fruit you have already out, or any sink or any place like that. But if you're having a problem on the kitchen counters, make sure you put it as close to the problematic area, and usually that involves the sink. So this next fruit fly trap goes back probably over 100 years, and it is a super simple method. You're going to need 4 tablespoons of raw sugar, brown sugar, a dark sugar like this, 1 cup of milk, and 2 tablespoons of black pepper. So this works so well because it kind of mimics the smell of fermentation. So it's super simple to do. I'll show you how to put it together in about 1 minute. Now this is my emergency stove that I'm using. I purchased this directly from South Korea. I believe it's now sold on Amazon, but it actually is. You can see right here there's some Korean writing, but this was actually originally sold in Korea, and I saw it on another video and I liked it so much I thought it was really nice. Good emergency stove. If you ever have power outage, this would be the way to cook your food. It works super simple. All you have to have these little gas canisters. They'll stay forever in your pantry. But let's get started by putting all these ingredients together on probably the oldest type way of catching fruit flies. Okay, we're going to start by heating our 1 cup of milk, and we're just going to put it on a very low boil. We don't want it cut as high as it'll go. We want to cut it down way down low, just a little bit of heat. And then we're going to add 4 tablespoons of our raw sugar or brown sugar. Okay, that's 4 tablespoons of that. And then next we're going to use our 2 tablespoons of black pepper. And so a lot of times if you don't have a lot of the other ingredients, a lot of times people definitely have milk and pepper in their kitchen. So this is one of those things, if you have nothing else, you could use this. You want to stir it, turn the heat up, and you just want it to come to a very, very slow boil. You don't want this to be a rolling boil, but this absolutely will mimic the smell of fermentation and attract them, the fruit flies, the gnats, right to your trap. All right, we're just going to carefully mix this because we want it to be well mixed to produce that imitation smell of fermentation. So we're going to put that together. Don't overheat it. Like I said, you don't need a strong boil, just a very soft boil. And we'll go on to the next step of putting the trap together. Now in this trap, I actually don't put it inside the plastic container. I just leave it out in the open like this. We want it to make it as accessible as possible with the fruit flies and gnats. They're going to go directly in there and drown in our mixture. So it'll only take about 24 hours to get rid of a really heavy fruit fly infestation. Now before we move on to trap number 5, I want to show you something that causes a lot of people to not be able to figure out how the fruit flies are reproducing so quickly. It involves your sinks, usually in the restroom, and I'll show you the trick to making sure that they don't reproduce in bathrooms and kitchens. If you have an overflow on any one of those sinks, I'll show you how to take care of it. Now a lot of people will tell you to pour Clorox down your drain, and there's a little bit of truth to that, but there's a reason why this doesn't always work. But if you see over here in this overflow, a lot of times the fruit flies will go into the overflow and lay their eggs down in this overflow area. So if you're putting Clorox into the drain, it never fully makes it back to this area. So mix a 50-50 mix of Clorox and water and pour it directly in the overflows in the sinks, the showers, anywhere that you have this overflow drain, because a lot of times this has a lot of organic matter in it that is built up over time, and fruit flies, this is a perfect place for them to reproduce, especially the little small gnats, sometimes referred to as drain flies. So the last fruit fly trap just involves regular honey, an index card, and some string. It's super simple to make, and this one really works great if you don't have any other ingredients. It's a little bit more complex to put together, but still pretty simple. So with our index cards, they're a little bit thicker than ordinary paper, and yellow is your preferred color. That's going to attract the most fruit flies. And on this red one right here, I'll just demonstrate how to put this together. You're going to punch a hole in the top of it. You're going to tie a little bit of string into the top. And you're going to place these near any type of fruit you have on counters, any trash cans, anywhere that you're having a problem with fruit flies. Also, you're going to want to have a drip tray below it. So that's basically what you're going to do. You're going to take this right here and you're going to put just a little bit of honey on it. You can spread it with a spoon or a small knife, and you want to make sure that it's just covered in the sticky substance all the way up and down, because the fruit flies are going to be attracted to this. Now you can put it on both sides or just one side, and then again hang it. If there's any possibility of dripping, if your honey is a little bit more runny than this honey's pretty thick, so I don't think it's going to drip very quickly, but just hang it anywhere near fruit flies, and again, having a drip tray will keep it from making a mess. The fruit flies will come to the trap and get stuck to it, and you can dispose of it very quickly and easily. Now there's a few more critical things you need to do to make sure you don't have a severe fruit fly infestation. Is you need to remember that anytime you throw any type of discarded fruit into the trash, you could be putting the eggs into the trash, and suddenly you'll open it up and you have just in that area, whether it's a compactor or up under a cabinet, you'll just have swarms of fruit flies in there. So make sure that you do some cleaning with alcohol sanitizer. This is just pure rubbing alcohol. I'll spray all around the system of the trash compactor and also the trash cans. Make sure you also use an alcohol sanitizer to wipe down your counter. Again, use the method of washing all of your fruits with the Castile soap or the very soft baby soap or the free and clear soap from Dawn. Also, you want to make sure that you refrigerate any fruits or vegetables to slow down the decomposition process, because the rotting fruit will also attract fruit flies. So you may have a door open just for a second and one may come in that way. So just make sure you clean the fruit as well as possible and then store it properly. Now another thing that's really important to do is to clean your drains. And if you have a septic system, you may find that it's not a good idea to put bleach in it, because you could kill the good bacteria in your system. So you can use a cup of white vinegar and 2 tablespoons of baking soda, mix it well, and then pour it into the drain, and also pour it into the overflows in your bathroom drains or in your bathroom showers. This will also kill any of the eggs or any of the drain flies or the other type of flies that live inside, the gnats that are living inside the system there. So common white vinegar will help. The 3% type is great. Now if this is a reoccurring problem with fruit flies and you just find it happening over and over, you can use something like a 1 or 2 liter soda bottle, cut the top off, and then just invert it like this. You can keep refilling it with whatever the products we've talked about previously, and this will be a long-term solution, so you don't have to keep punching holes in plastic. You can reuse this over and over and over. So if it is a lot bigger than a normal type of problem, then using something like a soda bottle would work even better. You can fill it maybe a little bit more full so more of the smell can get out. But just a common small soda bottle all the way up to a 2 or 3 liter would work great if you're having the problem reoccur over and over and you don't want to have to keep using Ziplocs or cling wrap. So guys, whether you're growing eggplants or peppers, whatever it might be, you're going to encounter this problem eventually. Fruit flies and all these other types of small insects will lay their eggs right on the outside of the fruit. So it's always a good idea to go through this entire process of cleaning it, and then if you have an infestation, use one of those 5 trapping methods and you'll find it works great. Guys, if you have a question about this video or any previous video, I hope you'll So guys, the worst feeling in the world is to be deep in the forest or deep on the trail and suddenly realize you have no mosquito repellent. Well, I'm going to show you how to turn a soda can like this into an all-day mosquito repellent. So let's head into the greenhouse. I'll get out of this garb and we'll show you how to put this together in about 15 minutes. So guys, probably any forest, any trail in America, you're going to find empty soda cans made out of aluminum, and this is the key component to making this work. It can be an all-day solution to mosquitoes. If you find that you're on the trail or deep in the forest and you've forgotten your mosquito repellent, this will work very easily, and there's 3 different sources you can use for fuel that will make it work, and one works better than the other 2, and I'll show you exactly how to turn that into our all-day mosquito repellent that you can carry around with you. Super easy and it's super simple to put together. So let's get started on making it. So the first thing you want to do is you want to have a good pair of leather gloves to do this, because you don't want to cut your fingers. So we'll take an empty can, and you can use something like one of these type of old-fashioned type of can openers. I've got one right here. I think they call this, is it a church key? Is that what they call it? I can't remember. But I'm just going to use an ordinary box cutter, and we're going to cut some V-shaped cuts into the top of the can. Now these things are made really thin now. Aluminum now is so thin in these cans. So what we want to do is we just want to punch out holes about every ½ inch along the can, and like I said, it's not easy to do, and it's better to wear a good pair of gloves when you're doing this. So just keep going all the way around the can, every ½ inch, punching holes in it, just pushing it in with your blade like that. Go all the way around, and I'll give you an up close in just a second. And again, don't try this without gloves, because it is so easy to cut yourself with a very sharp box cutter like this, or a pocket knife if you decide to use that. So we're just going to go all the way around the can like that, making those V-type cuts, and then push them in. I'll give you a little bit up close. Push them in with a blade so you have an opening in the top of the can in addition to your main opening. So just go around the can. Try to do that. And I know, like I said, these are so thin, they practically are like made like paper thin now, so it's so easy to put dents in them, but if you just work your way back around, you can pop those dents out and keep the shape of the can pretty well. Now at the base of the can, we're not going to cut the V shapes. We're just going to cut straight cuts all the way around. So we're just going to stab it into the can like that. Again, it's about every ½ inch. Just go all the way around. That. And this is going to be for an air intake. Sorry, I'm hoping you can hear me over the noise of the can. It's kind of making a lot of noise there. So at the bottom, you can see we've got little slit cuts all the way around. At the top, we have the V cut to allow some of our smoke to escape. And of course, make sure you don't break off the tab on the top. You want to keep the little opening tab as well. So that's the basic setup right there for the can itself. But I'm going to show you a very special. Actually, there's 3 items we can use, but I'm going to show you one of them that you can absolutely use that will repel mosquitoes once you get this to working. Now, there's 3 different fuel sources to make this work. This is a mushroom I found growing on the side of a fallen tree. It's not quite as dry as I would like it, but this will make an excellent fuel source if it's dry enough. The second would be any type of animal waste, and it has to be dry animal waste. It has to be out in the sun, and it has to be dehydrated. So remember, if you do opt to use the mushroom or the animal waste, it has to be as dry as possible. But I'm going to take you back out into the garden and show you what I think is the absolute best thing to use in our little small miniature mosquito repeller. Now this is an eastern red cedar growing in my garden, and these grow in almost every forest in America. And if you can find one of these, it is the perfect thing to use in our small portable mosquito repeller. It has a special type of oil in it that will repel mosquitoes. So what you want to do, you want to take the greenery, the small limbs, and especially the bark. Collect it, and then we'll put it in our can. So I'm going to use a pair of scissors and a hori-hori knife to scrape off some of the bark, and we'll collect that and then add it to the can. All right, so like I said, I'm going to collect a little bit of the small limbs, and we want some of the greenery too. That's really important because there's a lot of oils in there. There's oils in there, but to smell of this, it has a beautiful Christmassy strong smell. Humans love it, but mosquitoes hate it. They absolutely hate being around this, and it will repel them away. Also, I'm going to bring in a little closer and let you see me removing a little bit of the bark from the tree as well. Now you want to try to take a sharp knife and collect some of the outer area of the tree, because this is where a lot of the oils are at. So you can just scrape down the side of a tree, remove this bark area, and you take a good whiff of it, and you can absolutely smell the wonderful cedar aroma. So just remember, you can take a sharp knife and just remove some of the outer bark where a lot of these oils are contained. Now the way you want to do this is you want to take the bark that you've scraped off the tree, the outer area, and you want to put that in your can first. Then you want to take the green foliage and cut it into smaller pieces. You don't want to reverse that. You want that bark to be on the base and the cedar on the top for a very specific reason. You want a smoldering effect. You don't want to burn this in the can. You want it to smolder for anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. So it's really easy to put this together, but if you reverse those two, the bark might ignite very quickly and burn the entire thing up. So you have to have a smoldering effect going on. And there's one added thing. These strings right here, I'm going to show you how to use them to enable that smoldering effect very quickly. Now next you want some type of string, twine, small rope. The smaller the better, so we're going to use this garden twine, and probably about 3 to 4 feet of it is what you're going to need. We're going to cut that off, and we're going to tie it to the tab that we opened the can with initially before we drank it, and just tie it on right there. And so since there can be a little bit of flames coming out of the top, you can kind of pull it back so that way you don't burn your twine, and you want to cut off any excess twine because you want your twine to stay unburned. So we're going to take this out to the garden, and I'll show you exactly how to ignite it, and I'll show you how it will continue to smolder and repel mosquitoes away. I've sat on a camping area before with 2 of these going at the same time without any mosquito repellent. It had 0 bites over a period of about half an hour. Earlier today I made a couple more of these. This one was made in exact the same method, and this one I used the old-fashioned church key. I put some very large cuts in the top of it. I think this works better with the smaller holes, so let's light this. I've got just my kitchen torch, but you could use a lighter. You could light a match and drop it in there, but just remember, you don't want this to burn fiercely. You just want a smoldering effect. So we're going to light it, and then there's another trick we need to do after that. Now you've got it lit, we've started the burning process, but we don't want it to burn quickly, like I said, but we do want to provide some added oxygen to it. So you're just going to take it and swing it around like this and add more and more oxygen to it, maybe for 20 to 30 seconds. And if it doesn't seem to be burning as well, keep doing that, because that extra oxygen will help the fire or the smoldering effect increase a little bit. So I think we're going to have to do that a couple more times and get it to smoldering nicely. Now we have some rain moving in today, and we're starting to see some wind picking up, but I just want to show you the smoldering effect will put out the, I think I burnt through my string there. I meant to tell you that if you do leave your string dry, there's more of a chance of burning through it. So just make sure that you wet your string before you do this, or you'll do what I just did, which you'll burn through it. So it's a good lesson to learn, is that when you're lighting it, make sure your string is damp, or you keep it away from the open flame. But again, this takes a few times to get it to working properly, but once it starts the smoldering effect, it can last from anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, depending how much fuel. As you can see, we've got it smoldering really great, and like I said, depending how much fuel you put in it, this can last for anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. So it's really critical that you use cedar, because the oils in the cedar can really make a huge difference in repelling mosquitoes. So as I said earlier, I think cedar is the best mosquito repellent you would find in any forest, and they grow just about all over the United States. I know that in the southeast where I live, the eastern red cedar is almost in every forest. It may not be large and you have to look for it, but they are there. So this can was one of the first ones I tested. It worked great. The second one is a little discolored, but it does work great. So if you wanted to create a mosquito repellent for an entire campground, you could use something a bit larger. You can buy these unused empty paint cans from most hardware stores. If you don't have one near you, I'll put a link in the description. You can get gallon size or quart size, but I just tested it earlier, and let's see if we can get some of the smoke out. I put a lot of cedar chips in there, and then I just covered the lid until the fire went out, and then when I took it back off, we have that smoldering effect. So that would be a great way to repel mosquitoes. But then I was at a garage sale a couple of years ago, and I came across this very large minnow basket that's used for fishing. It's probably an antique actually, but you could use something like this as well. Fill it about halfway full, cedar bark and shavings on the bottom, and then top that with the green part of the cedar, the scale. I guess they call them scales, they don't call them leaves, but anyways, and then ignite it, and this thing would put out quite a bit of smoke for an entire campsite. So this would be an extra large mosquito repeller versus these small personal portable carriers. You could actually tie this to a string and tie it to your backpack and just kind of have it hanging off as you went, and maybe that would help repel some mosquitoes. But one thing I will tell you, these, when they're burning, even though it's a smoldering effect, can get really hot, so you don't want to touch this with your bare hands. You want to have a nice pair of leather gloves on. Again, you want to be careful, because if you knock it over, it could flame up and cause a fire. So just be very careful with them, as you're always dealing with an open flame in any situation. So I personally like the can size, because you can set it right next to where you're camping, and sometimes the smoke can get to you just a little bit, but cedar does not put off a massive amount of smoke in this smoldering effect. So I think it works great just to keep the mosquitoes away from you. Now there's a few extra items you could use in your mosquito repelling device. You could take dried citrus peels, you could take cinnamon bark or cinnamon sticks, and you could take the cloves that you find in most kitchen pantries. Take those and you can add it to the top of the can, so they'll kind of slowly smolder as well and put out that smell that mosquitoes really hate. Today we have a little bit of wind blowing, but if you're in an area that has very stagnant and still air, you can carry a battery powered fan with you and just have the fan right next to the can, and it'll blow over the can, it'll put more oxygen into it, and it'll circulate that smoke around your campsite. So mosquitoes in the summertime, especially in my yard, are absolutely horrendous. This year we've had an unusual amount of rain, and they are 10 times worse than they would normally be. So having something like this on the trail, if you've forgotten your mosquito repellent, can be a lifesaver. And if you don't like using mosquito repellent, try this if you don't like having the chemicals on your skin. Now, one last tip, if you're doing this around a campsite, you want to kind of set up a perimeter. So you may need to make as many as 6 of these in a larger campsite. If you don't have something large like this, like I said, you can find soda cans in every trash can and probably on the side of every trail in America. And so setting up that perimeter around your site, just kind of evenly spaced, can really add a kind of a barrier of protection from mosquitoes and other small flying biting insects. So guys, I really appreciate you watching. If you have a question about this video or any previous video, I hope you'll become a public subscriber first, because
Are pests in your garden getting you down? Are bugs, rabbits, deer, squirrels eating all your plants? There has to be a better way. Well, there is, Anne, and it happens to be a bunch of stuff we probably already have. I do have to apologize for the infomercial intro here, but honestly, as proper lazy gardeners, we don't want to have to put out a bunch of fabrics, buy a whole bunch of sprays, understand math and other ratios like that. We basically want to put seeds in the ground and come back when they're ready to pick. And that's what we're going to talk about in this video. The first thing that we're gonna do is ignore all of the absolutely silly advice that you're probably hearing from other YouTubers about keeping chickens in your garden. Chickens in your garden is the worst idea I could possibly imagine, because not only do they like doing this little thing on top of your baby plants, killing them, they also like uprooting our plants, digging our garden beds right out of the place that we want them, and also eating our delicious first fruits. Chickens are good for 3 things: fried chicken, making butt fruit, also known as eggs, and that's all actually. I don't know why they're here. If you absolutely insist on using birds in your garden, a far better option would be to use ducks. Very specifically runner ducks, because they're very bottom heavy and they don't tend to cause nearly as much damage as some of the other options available. Our first and probably best weapon against slugs, snails, and other things that leave a slimy trail are actually the foundation of lazy gardening themselves: wood chips. Wood chips do, yes, harbor moisture and make conditions in our garden more wet, which is indeed the ideal climate for slug snails and other things that leave a trail. But when those wood chips dry out in the heat of the midsummer, which is actually when slugs are our biggest opponent in the garden, they are actually prickly, dry, yucky spots for slugs, snails, and other things to have to climb over. So our first tip is literally just use wood chips. The next thing is to use little shards of sharp things like eggshells. Eggshells are fantastic sources of calcium and other valuable nutrients in our garden, but when we crumple them up around our plants, they also provide these sharp, yucky edges that slugs, snails, and other things like that don't want to actually have to climb over. Beer. Something that would never be proudly consumed in this household is also a fantastic anti-slug, snail, and other creepy crawly deterrent. If you happen to notice extra slug, snail, etc. pressure around any of your precious plants, put a little vial of this vile substance around them and you'll notice that you will trap those guys, and then you can feed the drunk, happy little slugs to whatever chickens or other garbage creatures you happen to have lingering around your homestead waiting to slurp those guys up. 2 other quick tips when it comes to the slimy creepy crawlies. Copper everywhere. When I am doing any kind of electrical project, I will strip the electrical wires out of my Romex wire and then use that to kind of line my garden beds. I'm always looking for shiny objects in the field, so here's a copper rod, which I'm not actually sure what it was for, but I can put it near my strawberries and it will, for whatever reason, science will deter the slugs from wanting to come in the garden. And my personal favorite, due to the fact that I am absolutely obsessed with what we make inside of here, and the fact that my entire life works because of what we make in here, coffee grounds are a fantastic source of not just nitrogen for our garden, or a brilliant way to restart our compost piles. Coffee grounds also happen to be a fantastic slug and other creepy crawly deterrent. So don't waste the stuff that you make every morning. Put it around the plants you like. It's very easy, as you can see. In this section of the garden, we can see a bunch of lazy gardening pest prevention tips in action. So first and foremost, here's a dill plant. This is a fantastic deterrent plant. It smells like pickles. A lot of people don't love pickles as much as I do, and a lot of pests don't like the smell of pickles nearly as much, once again, as I do. Similarly, we have a whole bunch of garlic, and these little cuties right here are garlic scapes. This is the preeminent sign that your garlic's almost ready to pick, but pro tip, these themselves are the most delectable treat that will come from your garden plant at all, so make sure not to waste those. It's like a little asparagus spear that's like 100% garlic. This is guaranteed to get rid of all vampires, mosquitoes, also potential lovers. Just saying. Spicy. Oh my God, it was so hot. One of the best things for lazy gardeners about dill itself is how it is a very easily self-seeding plant. So you'll actually see dill all over in the garden. Did I put it there? I mean, once, like 4 years ago, yes, but from then on, the wind moved it around for me, and I'm really thankful for it because it's all over and doing its job. As a lazy gardener, I'm a huge proponent of adding mulch and other organic matter, of using cardboard to suppress weeds. And one of the most frequently asked questions I get about using this kind of stuff in our garden is, won't that attract termites? Won't it attract earwigs? Won't it attract ants? What about snakes? And of course, what about those little roly-polies? So here's the thing. I've lived in the South for 5 years now. Termites are a huge issue here. I have probably 20 semi-trucks worth of wood chips delivered to my farm every year. Have termites actually become an issue in my home, my house, or anything else? Absolutely not. Have they become an issue in my garden? I do occasionally see them, but here's the thing. Termites do not eat our plants, nor, contrary to common belief, do roly-polies or earwigs. Actually, all 3 of those are insects that thrive by eating decaying plant matter. So if you happen to have a bunch of termites, roly-polies, or earwigs in your garden, it's not because they themselves are the things that are eating your plants. It's that you have some opportunists coming in to eat at the buffet that's caused by some damage by something else. There are tons of venomous snakes here in Tennessee, and to be totally honest, I have yet to see a single snake in my garden hiding underneath a piece of cardboard or a tarp or anything else. Where I have in fact seen the most venomous snakes is on my porch right outside my house, and I'm not quite sure what to do about that aside from getting more kittens. Which, in case you didn't know, cats are fantastic snake predators, as are pigs, but I don't know if Adam will let me have pigs on our porch. This $10 blacklight flashlight has been one of my favorite garden purchases, not just because it helps me to make hornworms, a favorite pest of tomato plants and other things in the nightshade family like peppers, etc., glow in the dark. It also has helped massively to feed my psychosis about germs and gross bodily fluids in the home as well. By the way, don't use tomato cages for tomatoes. They're actually fantastic for cucumbers and lots of other climbing plants, but they really suck for tomatoes. The only reason I have this thing on here now is actually to not lose it in the jungle that's growing around it before I put the actual structure up. And speaking of my OCD, which I'm not sure we were, but now we are, I got a vacuum to vacuum the spots that I couldn't get with my other vacuum, and it has turned out to be an enormous resource in the garden as well. I'll be totally honest here and say that I don't actually vacuum my plants very often. This is kind of more just like a silly thing that I do every once in a while when I notice that there's a bunch of jerks eating my plants. But the reason the vacuum is such an effective foe against all of these pests is because some of these pests, when squished, will actually emit a foul odor, which attracts more of their little jerk friends to join on the plants, so we don't want to do that. Some other pests, like the harlequin beetle, are extremely sneaky and very fast, and so we want to, instead of trying to catch them, vacuum them up really quick while we see them, and then we've got them. And also the eggs of a lot of these pests are so small that it's really easy to accidentally knock them off directly down below where there's a veritable buffet once they hatch, than to just vacuum them off in the first place. Does this look ridiculous to our neighbors? Absolutely. Is it something I actually do very often? Absolutely not. But since we're on the topic of really ridiculous gadgets anyway, this little electric tennis racket is one of my favorite ways to combat the carpenter bees that I often find in the garden, and truly, it's so satisfying. But as I talk about these gadgets, I'm also going to tell you not to go buy random stuff for your garden because, quite frankly, you don't need it. You don't need the organic ready chemicals. You don't need any of that stuff. You just need a little bit of understanding about how to create the best possible environment for the things we do want, how to discourage the things we don't want, and how to tell the good things and the bad things apart so we don't actually kill the wrong ones. I grew up listening to my dad complain about rabbits and deer and other pests that would hop over the fence and into his garden. And I have a three-pronged approach when it comes to deer, rabbits, gophers, squirrels, and all kinds of other things which might come into my garden and steal all the delicious treats I'm trying to grow for myself. The first prong is that my inner garden fence is actually protected by an outer garden fence that has electric lines both on the top and the bottom, which are constantly charged with an electrical charge, keeping deer from jumping over the fence, keeping raccoons and bunnies and other tunnelers like gophers from coming under the fence. And then this outer fence also happens to contain my alpacas, which are, contrary to common belief here on YouTube, not good predator protectors, but they are very stompy, and when they see little things that don't belong in this area around, they tend to be really good at chasing them off. We also have my donkeys, which absolutely hate cats, foxes, and basically anything else small as well. And finally, we have my livestock guardian dogs, which are great at protecting my goats, as well as, incidentally, protecting my garden here. I understand, however, gentle viewer, that you probably don't have the option to build two fences to have donkeys, alpacas, and livestock guardian dogs guarding your garden. And so this handy dandy product from my friend Billy at Permapastures Farms, Bone Sauce, is a fantastic deterrent for rabbits, deers, gophers, and lots of other things. It's a concentrated thing, you spray on your plants, and it helps keep those things away. Here's kind of a twofer. First of all, if we notice that any of our plants are being especially damaged, it is actually really helpful for us to remove the most damaged leaves from the plants and feed those to our chickens or compost them in our hot compost, which will kill the pests. It is important that we remember that hot part of the compost and not just put them in a cold pile where they'll be able to matriculate and create more and more pests pests that will then eat our stuff. Removing the diseased or half-eaten leaves is helpful for a lot of things. First of all, it's very likely that some pest has laid some eggs on these leaves, and giving them to our chickens or putting them in our compost will kill those things. But also, it will help our plants to recover from the damage of these pests faster. Because if we don't remove damaged leaves, then the plant will put a ton of energy into repairing the leaves that it currently has, instead of just putting new energy into creating new leaves, which will ultimately be better solar panels because they have less holes in them, and will ultimately serve the plant better as well. And this, my friends, would be a prime candidate for something that I would say should go directly into the chicken coop. And since we are in fact here in this very concentrated, densely planted brassica patch, do as I say and not as I do if you want to have good results in your garden. Don't plant a whole bunch of the exact same species all in one spot, because chances are quite high that all of the same pests and predators that will plague their cabbages and the kales and the other things in the same plant family will all congregate to the area where there's a veritable buffet for them to eat from. So let's interplant our plants with other kinds of plants from different plant families so that we don't get a whole bunch of these same kinds of pests all in the same kinds of places. Since this is actually a video about pests, I do feel I would be remiss not to mention the cacophony going on around us in this video at this moment. Directly behind me in my pond project I've teased about 300 billion times on this channel already, we have the tree frogs that are sounding a lot like bottle baby lambs that absolutely need to be fed immediately, which, as someone who's done that many times, feels very stressed hearing this "ma, ma" all the time. But we also have the added treat this year of a 177-year plague of cicadas. If you're in the Northwest and you don't know what I'm talking about, my God, ah, there's one right as we speak. Ah! They're very loud, they're very obnoxious, and I Googled, for the sake of this video, ways to get rid of cicadas because I thought it would be funny. And here's what Google said. Google recommends that we wait it out, aka wait for the cicadas to leave, use fans and other sound machines to drown out the sounds, create noise barriers so that you don't have to hear them as much, prune your trees. We've done that, and we still seem to have a few million of those around our property. Use netting. The last and probably most helpful piece that Google gave us was consult professionals about how to get rid of them. Thank you, Google. As you can hear, our cicada problem has been solved. Our next line of defense when it comes to pests in the garden is being able to actually tell the difference between the good guys and the bad guys. And so on the occasion that we as lazy gardeners are out with our little vacuums or our weird electric fly swatter things, or if we are ever actually spraying any kind of deterrents, we want to be able to tell who it is that we're nixing and who it is that we're inviting to the tea party. Here's a list of the good guys in the garden. Under no circumstances should you do anything to deter or get rid of or kill or accidentally vacuum any of these ones. Ladybugs, also known as ladybird beetles. Ladybugs are probably the most popular pesticide insects we have in our gardens, and that's because they eat aphids. I myself found out that I was deathly allergic to ladybugs when I decided to order 2,000 of them and release them in my garden. But first, as a good content creator would, I made a photo shoot of the releasing process, and then my eyes swelled shut and my doctor told me that ladybugs secrete the same kind of fluids that lobsters do, and my shellfish allergy really didn't help me in that situation. Lacewings. Their larvae consume aphids, caterpillars, and other soft-bodied insects. Hoverflies. Adult hoverflies feed on flower nectar and help pollinate some crops, but it is the larvae that are important predators in the garden. The tiny, nearly invisible slug-like larvae scour the undersides of plant leaves for aphids and eat them as their primary food source. Ground beetles eat slugs, snails, cutworms, and other soil-dwelling pests. Praying mantises, praying manti. Anyway, they hunt a variety of garden pests, including caterpillars, beetles, and grasshoppers. Parasitic wasps lay eggs on or in pest insects such as caterpillars, aphids, and beetles. Spiders, though their webs are very obnoxious and sometimes quite scary, will catch and eat a wide range of insects, including mosquitoes and flies, both of which have potential to be good, but mostly are bothersome and disgusting and gross, and we don't want them. Dragonflies prey on mosquitoes and other small flying insects. Damsel bugs, which I've often accidentally mistaken for squash bugs. Please don't do that, my friend. Damsel bugs are a huge helper in our garden because they feed on aphids, caterpillars, leafhoppers, and other negative insects. The larvae of soldier beetles feed on insect eggs and their larvae, while the adults can actually pollinate a lot of the flowers that will produce fruit and/or flowers in our garden. Assassin bugs attack a variety of insects, including caterpillars, beetles, and flies. They also look real weird. Make sure you check them out. The very strangely named big-eyed bugs, which to me look exactly like flies, are also avid eaters of aphids, caterpillars, and mites. I used to think that robber flies were the same thing as horseflies, so I would chase them around like a maniac with my electric fly swatter, but now I regret that because I now know that robber flies are actually good for our garden because they're really good at capturing and consuming other insects that happen to be flying around them at any given time. Earwigs, while sometimes pests themselves, generally speaking are great garden predators because they eat aphids, mites, and a lot of other garden pests too. So if you see the earwigs, maybe put an earplug in and protect your ears, and then just let them do their thing in the garden because they're pretty good. Fireflies, also known as lightning bugs, are fantastic garden predators because they feed on slugs, snails, and other small invertebrates. So don't kill those ones, my friends. They're great. I love amaranth not just because it's a beautiful pop of color all over the garden, but also because it is a fantastic trap plant or sacrificial plant, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is a plant that attracts a bunch of the creepy crawlies that might otherwise creep and crawl on our other plants that we want to eat, that then land on the amaranth, eat the leaves, have their orgies, lay their eggs, whatever else, and then we can just pull the plant, do a little chop and drop action, and there we have it. There are, however, a bunch of trap plants we can put in our garden that will help to protect our plants from the predators at large. Those are nasturtium flowers, which in Tennessee are very hard to grow unless you plant them very early in the season because it's frankly just too hot for them here. But when we lived in Washington, I planted them all over the place. Nasturtiums attract aphids, whiteflies, squash bugs, and cabbage loopers, which basically means that they're going to best protect our tomatoes, cucumbers, brassicas, and radishes. Radishes are absolutely disgusting garden feces, but happen to also help protect the rest of our plants, so it's probably a good idea to plant them or whatever. They attract flea beetles and root maggots, which protects our cucumbers, squash, melons, and cabbages. Emphasis on the melons because watermelon is our favorite food. Marigold flowers attract aphids and nematodes, which help our tomatoes, beans, peppers, and melons. Mustard makes the most disgusting condiment known to man, but they also help to attract flea beetles and aphids, which protects our tomatoes, potatoes, and beans from said flea beetles and aphids. Blue Hubbard squash, don't even ask me what that's for, tends to attract squash borer beetles or vine borer beetles, and that keeps them away from our cucumbers, our melons, and the other things that actually taste good and we want to eat. Chervil, which doesn't even sound like a real plant, but it does exist, I promise, attracts slugs, which then keeps those slugs away from the other things that they might eat. Dill, also known as dillweed, also known as God's companion to cucumbers for dill pickles, the Lord's fruit, diverts hornworms from being attracted to our tomato plants and then attracts the hornworms to the dill, which then is not damaged by the hornworms. And then we can shine our black light right on them, illuminate them, and feed them right to our chickens. Borage, sounds a lot like forage, it's not, attracts tomato hornworms and protects our tomatoes and our strawberries. Don't ask me why, that's science. Ants are particularly pesty, whatever, but if you pour boiling water repeatedly down their holes, if you can find their holes, they will eventually decease. Another great way to get rid of ants is to use cornmeal. You basically pour little pockets of cornmeal all over your garden, and the idea is that the ants will carry that cornmeal back to the nest, they'll eat it, and then their stomachs will explode, which sounds really gross and awful, but they deserve it. They're the worst. And speaking of ants, here's another funny way that dyslexia has really screwed up my life. So I recently went to the restaurant supply store to buy in bulk a bunch of things that could potentially help me get rid of pests in my garden. Cinnamon powder in bulk, garlic powder in bulk. My mind played tricks on me and I thought I needed to buy a bunch of cornstarch when really I needed to buy a bunch of cornmeal. So if you, gentle reader, have any ideas about how I can use 50 pounds of cornstarch to my benefit, aside from opening a Play-Doh factory, I would love to hear your ideas. Please leave them in the comments below. Planting mint or oregano or other things in the mint family are a great way to deter pests that rely on their sense of smell to return to the same spot to eat a bunch of stuff. So like ants, hate mint, hate oregano, hate citrus peels, hate cucumber peels, anything that smells strongly enough that they might get lost on their way back to their hole. I'm generally an opponent, not a proponent, of buying any extra random stuff we need for the garden, because most of the stuff we actually need we can either grow or find ourselves cheap for free without ever having to leave our homesteads, which ultimately is the goal, let's be honest. However, there are a few things that we can use, like diatomaceous earth, which is probably the most misunderstood organic chemical we could possibly have on our homestead. So let's just talk about it really quick. Diatomaceous earth is a naturally occurring crystalline powder that will help us to discourage any pest that has an exoskeleton. And by that I mean any insect that has a hard shell on the outside. Diatomaceous earth is relatively inexpensive and it is really easy to just sprinkle around our plants that are having a lot of pest pressure, but it will only work when it's dry. I've heard a lot of baloney about people using diatomaceous earth to be ingested to actually kill parasites and things like that. And while I would love to believe in the potential benefits of doing that, the way that I understand diatomaceous earth to actually work is that you need the crystals to be super dry so that when the creepy crawly walks over it, it basically dissolves their outer shell or pokes a whole bunch of holes into their armor and then they die. I rattled off a lot of different random lists and other things in this video, and if you want to see those actually laid out in a more logical, rational way, check out my Squarespace website, annofalltrades.com. As a total tech Luddite myself,
as gardeners, we're taught from the very beginning to fight the very thing that actually has the power to solve all of our food growing problems: weeds. Weeds are not the problem every gardener has been taught to believe they are. They're solution to every problem we face. They're the answer, not the enemy.
Two months ago, this was completely bare soil. I brought my pigs in here for 6 months to make me a pond, and they did a great job, but they left an absolute barren wasteland in their wake. I have not put a single seed in here, and somehow, just 2 months later, we've got ourselves a jungle again. And the real question is, where did those seeds come from? Why are some plants growing in some places and not others? And what job are these weeds actually trying to do as Mother Nature fixes herself? Oh, it sucks getting old. When our ancestors started farming, which is a fancy way of saying that they decided to start intentionally cultivating the most delicious weeds in one place so that more humans could have access to them without having to go out and forage for them, they also figured out that plowing the soil would artificially create a bunch of necessary conditions for plants to thrive, and it worked great, at least for a while. But the problem is, when we as humans disrupt Mother Nature's way of naturally taking care of herself, all of a sudden the entire burden of taking care of everything falls on us. Plowing makes light, fluffy soil that is water permeable, a nice spot for seeds to germinate and have space for their roots to spread out. It initially eliminates all of the weeds and other things that the farmer didn't want to grow in that area that might compete with the plants they wanted to grow for sunlight. If we're gonna plow the soil, we then need to figure out a way to cover it back up. Otherwise, all of the water will evaporate from that dark surface. When we no longer have different heights of plants shading the soil differently, when we no longer have different species of plants that are taking up different nutrients and minerals and all of those things, then dropping their foliage down onto the soil and adding it back into the soil, all of a sudden the entire burden of fertility falls on us as farmers as well. Though there are tons of different nutrients and minerals that plants actually need to survive, someone really smart a while back figured out that if we basically had nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, most plants could grow pretty okay. So we started creating that artificially and adding it to the soil as well. And that is where things really started to fall apart. Now that we understand weed theory, it's time to actually put it into practice. How do we read what the weeds are telling us? How do we plant what we would prefer to plant in their place? And how do we actually use the weeds that are present to create the fertilizer that's going to fix our soil in the long term completely for free? If you've been watching this channel for a while, you know that when we started, this whole farm was compacted clay, unplantable soil. And I fixed the soil here by observing what was going on in the forest and trying to copy it here at home. And if you want to watch a whole video about that, that involves a soil scientist coming to evaluate our farm, showing how to test our soil and all those things, click over here or one of these places over here and you can do that. But here's the thing, even if you watched that video, you probably know that from 1 square foot to the next, our soil chemistry can totally change. And instead of going through the trouble of doing a soil test, we could actually just look down and see what the weeds are telling us as far as what the soil is deficient in, what we could plant instead of the weeds that are present, and also how we could use the weeds that are present to fix the soil and stop battling the same weeds year after year after year. The alpaca shears are still broken, so the sprinkler is still in full effect, but actually, look at this. Nature is taking back over where I used to have the chicken coop last spring. What was once barren wasteland has now been replaced with a beautiful bed of ragweed, pokeweed, and other detritus that why would we fight when we can just let it fallow and turn back into a luscious pasture whenever the weeds are done doing what weeds do. Hi, Polly, you handsome little boy. Soak it up. Every spring, this entire area gets covered in an absolute blanket of chickweed. Most gardeners would look at that sea of chickweed and come to the conclusion that chickweed keeps growing here because there's a ton of chickweed seeds in the soil here. And they're not wrong. But what most people don't know is that there aren't just chickweed seeds. There are 300 years worth of random seeds that are all in there that, for whatever reason, Mother Nature knows to tell which seeds to come up in which places at which time. And then once they've done the job that they were put there to do in the first place, they disappear and the next thing starts coming up. So our job, if we want to be good lazy gardeners, is to stop looking at weeds like pests and start letting them teach us what they have to teach us. So in that, let's take a quick look at the environment here that seems to be so dang perfect for chickweed. This area right here is at the end of a sloped driveway. You can actually see nature taking its course behind me here. When it rains, which it does quite a bit here, all of the water is going to come off of the barn, roll down the sidewalk, and get trapped right here in this area. Chickweed loves to have wet feet. It likes really, really moist soil conditions. Chickweed also really likes excessive nitrogen because it is a plant that grows 100% on top of the soil and basically puts down no root structure. My donkeys like to stand here every night, and as they do that, they leave all kinds of little nitrogen deposits that I can't really keep up with my rake and shovel. And so as it happens, all of the water running down the hill, plus all of the nitrogen that the donkeys are constantly depositing, is making a perfect environment for chickweed to totally thrive.
You should wash your hands.
In preparation for this video, I tried really hard to find a whole bunch of weeds in the garden, but hilariously, learning how to work with the weeds instead of work against them has worked so phenomenally well over the last 5.5 years that I don't actually have any weeds to show you. So let's hop back over into the new garden space that is currently Weed City. Oh my gosh, strawberries, so good. Here is a real common enemy of people in our gardening zone, the cocklebur. This little jerk of a plant puts on little Velcro seeds that stick to every single piece of fur and fluff and get transported all over the farm. Those same cockleburrs also really like to get stuck in all of my animals' fur and cause them all kinds of hot spots and sores, and these things are basically the bane of my existence. My dad has spent much of his last 4 years worth of visits trying to pull the cockleburrs and trying to burn the fields, which also nearly ended up in our neighbor losing their house last year. Thank God for fire blankets, let's just say that. But I've been telling my dad for 5 years since we moved here that instead of battling the cockleburrs by trying to get rid of them, by pulling them and killing them and doing all these other things, we should just figure out what the cockleburrs are telling us about the soil, fix the soil, and we probably won't have to worry about them ever again. Cockleburrs tend to show up in soil that has been disturbed, overgrazed, has an extreme lack of soil fertility, and also has a high moisture content. Which makes sense why half of our pasture over there is covered in cockleburrs, because this land was overgrazed for 20 years by all manner of different species. There was multiple different pond sites, which now tend to accumulate a whole lot of rainwater. And yes, after being highly disturbed and overgrazed, there is very little fertility in the soil over there. Current conventional farming methods would have you spray a broadleaf pesticide like Grazon on that entire field so that only grass would grow and that there wouldn't be cockleburrs present to compete with the native grasses. But then all of this spent hay that we would use from a sprayed field would then poison half of our plants in our garden, which you can actually see a bunch of YouTubers making videos about right now. They use straw bales in their garden, and now their beans, tomatoes, and other plants are totally ruined. And let's not just breeze past the fact that salad is disgusting, which is why we raise beef in the first place, so that our beef can eat our salad on our behalf and turn it into a ribeye steak, which is much more delicious. Do I want a ribeye steak that has been 100% grass-fed with poisoned grass? Absolutely not! So my personal strategy when it comes to managing cockleburrs in an organic and future-thinking way is to come in and cut them right before they go to seed so that they have less plant material to actually turn into seeds. Then, hilariously, I also use the very thing that caused their appearance in the first place. I overgraze the areas that have cockleburrs in them and then plant competing plants like ryegrass earlier in the season so that there's competition for the seeds that are still in the soil. Absolutely, there's millions of them. We're not going to ever get rid of all those seeds. Just, oh my gosh, hold on. Let me go check something out in the barn really quick. So, thank you, Livestock Guardian Dogs, for alerting us to the fact that this little jerk, Jeffrey, has apparently just broken a hole in the fence and come in to have himself a grand old time. Welcome to farm life. Anyway, join me for a moment and I'll show you the project I have actually been working on since Jeffrey's last break-in. For the last year, since the last entry of Jeffrey happened and I ended up having to sleep in the barn on a cot on the floor of my office for like a month and a half while I waited for goat babies to be born, I decided to build this. It's not done yet, so don't fully judge it, but this might just be my proudest thrifting opportunity yet. Ta-da! As most projects that I start do, this got a little out of hand, and what started as just needing a place to put my mattress expanded because I got a really good deal on some flooring remnants, and I had some recycled paint and some other random stuff left over from our house remodel. I had exactly enough cherry left over to frame out the windows beautifully, and now here we are with a hayloft that is now basically an apartment. One thing that's really important for me as we do any sort of advertising integrations on this channel is talking about brands that we already use and love. We're not gonna get paid just to like a product and then tell you to buy some random stuff. And that was exactly what happened here with Brooklyn Bedding. Adam and I's bed up at the house is from Brooklyn Bedding and we absolutely love it. So when it came time to pick the right mattress for this space, the nicer that the space became, the more that I realized I was probably gonna spend more and more time up here. And this would be a really sweet spot to have guests come and stay as well. So I contacted Brooklyn Bedding and I was like, hey, would you like to support our channel? And that is in fact how we ended up with this queen size Sedona Elite. One really unique thing about this space, I could not in any world get a regular mattress that was already unfolded up and around the stairs here. And so Brooklyn Bedding shipped me a smallish box with a little bit of help from Adam. I was able to bring it upstairs, set it in place, and it was expanded and ready to use pretty quick. So if you find yourself in need of a new bed, check out brooklynbedding.com. And if you use the code AnnofAllTrades at checkout, you will get a 25% discount, which is significant. And just to bring things full circle, this formerly bed box is about to become a brand new garden bed. Okay, back to the weeds, what they can tell us and how we can use them to actually fix our soil. This you might recognize as a dandelion. Dandelions are all over the place. They tend to show up in super compacted soil. Think about the fact that water needs to be able to enter soil. The tap roots of plants like dandelions and dock and things go really, really deep to mine nutrients and bring them up to the soil surface in the form of plant matter like this. One other unique thing about dandelions is that they indicate that right here in this spot, not only is the soil compacted, there's also a lack of calcium. So as lazy gardeners, though dandelions are technically edible, they're disgusting, we could probably pull this dandelion and plant something that looks like a dandelion, and then take the green matter of the dandelion that currently exists in this spot, put it in some water to create some calcium-rich fertilizer that we can then use to water whatever replacement plant we plant in this place, which will ultimately fix the soil the way the dandelion was supposed to fix it, and will keep further dandelions from showing up in its place in the future, which ultimately accomplishes all of our goals. We have a soil test. Yeah, soil is compacted and needs calcium. We have a fix for the soil, and we also have a more delicious counterpart that we can plant in its place. Oh my Lanta, what is that? A fly, no seams. Let's show you how to put this in water. Can I help you? Look, we're creating fertilizer, not giving donkey snacks, but if you insist, I will give you each one dandelion leaf for your pleasure and for the furtherance of my problems, most likely. All right. Okay, so we're taking the dandelion leaves that we've harvested, which, assuming that the taproot of the dandelion has done its job in bringing up the calcium that the presence of the dandelion has indicated is lacking in our soil. We're gonna then come over here to our very handy dandy rainwater collection setup, and we're going to use rainwater to create some dandelion sludge tea. If you have a well or other natural water source, you don't have to use rainwater, but the state of Tennessee is so lovely to massively over-chlorinate our water, and that tends to kill the beneficial microbes that grow in our soil. So using tap water to create fertilizer is counterproductive here. So we find creative ways to collect rainwater to then create basically a poor man's version of compost tea that we will cover, let putrefy in the sun, and then we'll ultimately use that in a diluted fashion to water our plants that we plant in the place of whatever weed we're picking, which then, again, hopefully will fix the soil in the way that it needed to be fixed. And then those weed seeds that are definitely in the soil already will probably remain in the soil for the next 300 years, but won't reappear until another overcompaction, overgrazing, or extreme lack of calcium need necessitates their reappearance. But here's the thing. Those dandelions were not growing in a vacuum. They were growing amongst a whole bunch of other weeds, which probably indicate other lacks in the soil and other plants that we could plant in their place, and some more weeds we could add to our concoction to make it a little bit more potent and ultimately a little more useful. So let's go do that. By the way, don't mind the fact that I'm currently in the midst of constructing a new garden fence for our new garden. And this is what that looks like. Right where we pulled the foliage from the dandelion plant, we also have lady's thumb, which is an indicator of poor soil drainage, an excessive amount of moisture, and low soil fertility, which then makes sense that we have other things like these little things, which are in the legume family, which are nitrogen fixers, aka are going to increase the fertility of the soil. And around them, there's all kinds of different grasses too that are also going to fix nitrogen and increase the fertility and the drainage of the soil. So if we, instead of just making a tiny little microcosm of fertilizer for this one little space, look at a slightly larger area of space and then include things like this ragweed, which increases organic matter to the soil. We'll put that in there and basically just grab a whole bunch of handfuls of other things and put in the bucket as well. And then we'll come back in here and plant a whole bunch of things like the things that are already growing here. So instead of a dandelion, which has a deep taproot, we could plant other things that have taproots, like turnips. Instead of this ragweed, we can plant, oh my gosh, it's already here. Wonder how that happened. Something that's in the same exact family, but actually does something good for us, which is amaranth. Not only does that provide a pop of color and gives us natural dyes for our plants, it also creates an edible grain that we can dry out and use like we would any other cereal grain, like oatmeal, or grind it into flour and use that to make a tortilla. And we'll take all this stuff, make it into a nice concoction, let it putrefy for a while, put some cardboard and some compost down, and we'll put all kinds of stuff that we do want in its place. And then throughout the gardening season, we will water the plants that we do want in this area with the fertilizer we've made from the plants we don't want. And yes, there are thousands of different combinations of different weed fertilizers we can make for different purposes, and different plants we can plant in the stead of the weeds that we don't want. But those need to be their very own videos. But in the meantime, I'm gonna make this video really count and give you a very fast, very quick list of a lot of the weeds that are most commonly found in most gardens, and what we as lazy gardeners can grow in their place to perhaps have a little more success with a little less hands-on effort. In case you didn't catch this earlier, the most important lesson from this video is that Mother Nature does not like to be naked. So anytime we do anything to uncover her or reveal her more precious areas, aka soil, we need to be absolutely certain to do everything in our power to, as quickly as possible, cover her back up, because if we don't cover her back up, she's gonna cover herself back up, and we're probably not gonna love, as gardeners who wanna grow vegetables, not weeds, the way she chooses to cover herself back up. The best way to do that is this: mulch, also known as organic matter. Wood chips is decaying organic matter, which then creates a growing medium, aka roots, for other plants to grow. And this is ultimately what we need. Another fun fact, just because we're here, is that wood chips come from trees. Trees are basically giant straws that spend their entire lives sucking up moisture from their root system in the ground up into the leaves of the foliage above. And then when the tree falls over and dies, and we chip it up because it's in our way and whatever else, those wood chips then become amazing little sponges that then soak up water as it falls from the sky in the form of rain, and then hold it in place. It keeps our soil from eroding. It also acts like those little Ola pots that cost like $60 a piece to self-water our garden for the very, very cheap price of for free. But I digress. I promised you a very quick list of common weeds, what they tell us about our soil, and how we can use those weeds to fix our soil, and also what plants we can plant instead of those weeds if we don't want those weeds. Here we go. If, like me, you have an overabundance of chickweed in the early spring in donkey poop-ridden areas, you can either pick that chickweed and use it as greens in your salad if you want to make your salad more disgusting. Or you can take notice of the fact that chickweed really likes to grow in very moist, nitrogen-rich soil, which is also a great place to plant buttercrunch lettuce, which is delicious and delightful and doesn't taste like a weed. Supposedly, some people put chickweed into their smoothies as an anti-inflammatory and as a positive skin aid, but that's why I use beef tallow as lotion, and I don't have to mess with drinking weeds. If you happen to notice clover growing in your soil, that is an indication that you have a nitrogen deficiency. Clover is in the legume or the bean family, so a great replacement crop is anything in the bean family. Anything that can take nitrogen somehow scientifically from the air and turn it into a nodule that then puts nitrogen directly into your soil. What a wild world we live in. If you happen to see plantain growing in your garden, that is a great indication that you have very compacted soil that is also very much in need of some calcium and some potassium, things that plantain will bring up from its root system and then deposit on the soil surface through its leaves. A lot of people like to know where their plantain is growing so that in a pinch, if they get stung by a bee or have a surprise wound happen, they can grab the leaves of the plantain, quickly chew them up, and then spit them onto their sting or their wound, and supposedly it creates some relief, but also that seems like a lot of work. I see gardeners fighting purslane all the time. Purslane is a fantastic ground cover, and also an indication that this is a great place for you to try to plant some cucumbers or other vining plants that will grow across the soil. Because guess why purslane shows up? Because you've left Mother Nature without her underpants in public and she's trying to cover herself up. Another great ground cover, strawberries. They grow all over the place. And then you have the side effect of strawberries, which are delicious, delightful, and who doesn't want a strawberry? I get tons of questions from folks battling bindweed, and I used to have bindweed growing along my entire fence area here. I let it do its thing, and then, shock of all shocks, it resolved itself, and I haven't seen any since. Probably because I planted a whole bunch of pumpkins and watermelons in its place, and they did what the bindweed was there to do in the first place. Thistle seems to be a big weed contender in a lot of people's gardens. And here's the thing, what looks exactly like thistle? Artichokes. My third favorite food. Plant artichokes everywhere thistle grows and you'll have artichokes instead of weeds. Here in Tennessee, we are also constantly battling a sea of different grasses. Nimbleweed, crackgrass, crabgrass, Bermuda grass, all of the gross grasses that seem to just grow and spread no matter what we seem to do, which is exactly why I have employed the use of cardboard and cover crops wherever I possibly can. Everywhere that I notice a blade of grass coming up, I think about what I could possibly plant that will grow earlier in the season than that grass, and then shade out that grass and stop it from being able to establish roots and spread further into my garden. And where I can't stop it from spreading further into my garden, I work on adding fertility to the soil. And then at the end of the day, I go to bed and I sleep very well. Not just because I've moved a whole bunch of wheelbarrows worth of mulch, but also because I did the best that I could, and that is, buddy, good enough. We do not need our gardens to look picture perfect. I used to live in a place that had an HOA, and all I had to do to get around the rules of the HOA was become the secretary of the HOA and delete all of the complaint emails before they actually could get to the rest of the board and I could actually get in trouble. And then we moved to the country, which has worked out really, really well for me. I would absolutely love to spend a little bit more time going over some of the absolute nerdery that makes lazy gardening work. And to that end, a couple weeks ago, I made a video touring the very forest, aka my backyard, that I modeled this garden after, that has ultimately produced thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of produce without very much human intervention at all. If you want to learn some of those same lessons from the forest as I did, check out this video. I will see you there. Cheers! All right, Howdy, I will give you a few snacks.
So guys, today we're talking about dragonflies in 20 different ways that you can attract them to your yard. It's really simple. It's not as hard as you think. Some people will tell you you need a massive pond for dragonflies. It helps to have a larger pond, but I'm going to show you ways you can do it really small, really inexpensive, and it will definitely make a difference in your insects like mosquitoes. One dragonfly can eat 100 mosquitoes. So follow along and I'll give you 20 different ways you can make a habitat that's perfect for dragonflies, and they'll come back year after year and multiply, and you will definitely reduce the amount of mosquitoes you have in your yard. So guys, a water feature like this I'm showing you is a little bit more complicated to set up, but if you'll look at it, you'll see that the water looks fairly clear and clean. This water feature runs through a stream, runs into a bog area, and then is pumped back into a reservoir, so it just keeps repeating that cycle over and over. The most important thing you can do is to make sure that you have different water depths, because the eggs that are being laid may be laid in a very shallow area, and by the time they're at their final stage, it may be a little bit deeper. So just remember that it's important to have water feature that has different depths within that feature. Now guys, one of the first things I will tell you, you want to make perches throughout your yard. And when I say perches, I'm not talking about anything very large, not something you need for a bird, but something such as these little small stakes you can buy on Amazon. I'll put a link in the description, but you just want to put these about a foot into the ground so they don't get knocked over either easy, and the dragonflies will land on these and it will establish a hunting ground throughout your yard. You may buy an entire pack like this and you can just kind of space them out. So you want to make it very inviting for your dragonflies to live in the yard. I'll show you some other places where I have natural perches that just come back every year and they grow. So we'll head out to that area and I'll show you exactly what that looks like. So throughout the video, I'm going to show you some photographs of dragonflies that have been taken in some of these areas, such as cattail. Cattail is a great plant. If you have a little bit of a bog area in your yard, and this is not tremendously boggy in the wintertime, it does get a little bit muddy in the soil area, but it's not so boggy that it's a swamp. But these, I've noticed, will be loaded with dragonflies throughout the summer, perching on top in this open grass area, and they'll fly out and go after mosquitoes. That's usually in the morning or late evening as their normal hunting times. But planting something like a native plant that will grow in your area is a really great thing to do. So if cattails grow in your area, and they almost grow everywhere, that would be really good to plant. And you may have to add a little bit of support and allow maybe some water to collect under them if you have a really dry soil or if you're in an arid environment. So just make sure that you allow them to get plenty of water, because it is a plant that doesn't like to completely dehydrate. Now, if you want to plant something that allows the dragonflies to land and then swoop out into the grass areas to go after the mosquitoes that are out there, something like this ornamental grass is a great thing, because at the end of summer, it starts sending out the shoots like this, and it provides a great place for the dragonfly to light, land, and even during other times of the year, I've seen dragonflies landing on the grass blades. So just remember that something that may not be a bog plant will still be an ideal place for them to start their day hunting. Now, this bog area I've set up is planted with pickerel, and there's water down below. Sometimes it gets a little bit low, so I have to add some to it, but it's a bog garden that I've set up. It's a perfect place for dragons to come in, hunt for other insects, mosquitoes, and other things that might be pollinating these plants, because mosquitoes actually do pollinate. But this area is the perfect spot. It's very small. It's only about maybe 6 by 8, and it's a perfect environment for the dragonfly. It can lay the eggs, take off, and it can just slowly grow those water, I guess they're called nymphs. But anyways, that's what they do. They will slowly multiply in something like this, as long as the water doesn't completely dry out. That's the most important thing. Now, you can create something this small in a pot. This pot was purchased from, I think it was either Lowe's or Home Depot, but the size of this is not really as important as you'd think, as long as you're adding fresh water to it and don't allow the water to dry out. But over time, the dragonflies will come in, light on the top of the leaves, hunt around for mosquitoes, and then on occasion I have seen them actually laying eggs on the opposite side. There's gravel on one side and water on the other. So it's the perfect place for the dragonfly to lay its eggs. It sees that water in there. It's 2 to 3 inches deep on the backside, and it will definitely sprout new dragonflies in a certain amount of time. Now, sometimes they can be in the water for quite a while. It might take 1-2 years for the eggs to completely develop, come out, molt out of their skin, and become a new dragonfly. Now, this is equisetum or horsetail, and it's also in a pot that I purchased from Lowe's or Home Depot. And down at the under the equisetum, there's about 1 to 2 inches of standing water year round. This does not drain out. So I add water in the hottest times of the year. It's actually on part of the irrigation system, so it never completely runs dry. So this is what's so important, is having the right conditions for the dragonfly. This water will be purified by the Equisetum and it will maintain fairly clear. I've seen it get a little bit green in some parts of the summer, but you want it to be a little bit in the shade so it doesn't get too much algae in the water. I'll shoot some pictures for you, or I'll upload them so you can see exactly what I'm talking about with the dragonflies landing on Equisetum. Now here overlooking the bonsai garden, you'll see a lot of bamboo poles sticking up, and that's another important thing. You want your stakes, bamboo poles, sticks, whatever you decide to put into the ground, you want them to be 18 inches off the ground or higher, up to 10 to 12 feet for those dragonflies to light. They'll sometimes just sit there for 15 or 20 minutes until they're ready to start hunting, and they see a swarm of mosquitoes and they will attack them and start devouring them very quickly. So earlier in the year, I made a video about how to make a trellis that will last forever for your vegetable garden, and I'll put that link up above. But one thing you want to do is you want to create high perches in your vegetable garden, especially if it's going to be somewhere where you work a lot and you don't want mosquitoes, gnats, flies bothering you. The vegetable garden is the perfect place for the hunting because it's usually an open, sunny area, and that's what dragonflies want. They want an open, sunny place where they can hunt down their prey. And by having these up here, they can land on top of them. They can kind of scan the area. They have great eyesight. They can see even things that we can't see. So they'll spot the mosquitoes and other things flying around. And I've noticed when I'm working out in the garden, they'll just be swarming all around me. I never put any pesticides in the garden that might harm them. I try to use all natural things to control the insects on my vegetables. But I want the dragonflies to multiply and be as many as possible throughout the summer. I'll put some photographs of dragonflies that have been around the vegetable garden, and it's amazing. If you just give them the right environment, they will multiply very quickly and devour up to 100. I think I may have said this earlier, but they can devour up to 100 mosquitoes in one day per dragonfly. So let's head into the greenhouse and I'll show you many other ways to get dragonflies to consider your yard as the perfect environment. So you're not limited to just these large ponds. As I said earlier, you can create the perfect environment for a dragonfly in something as small as this container right here. I'll put a link to these if they're still selling them. I've had this for over 10 years. I've used it for a lot of different purposes, but I'm about to make it into a dragonfly habitat. And one of the plants I'm going to be putting in it is going to be canna lilies. These were purchased at Walmart as bulbs in the springtime. And as you can see, they've done quite well in these small 1-gallon pots. I've just kept it near an irrigation system. They die back in the winter and they come back, but they'll help purify the water and also give a place for the dragonflies to land, hunt, and then eventually decide this is the perfect spot for them to lay their eggs. So canna lilies are perfect. They can tolerate soggy and wet soil. Now, one of the things you might be worried about is mosquitoes breeding very quickly, because the dragonflies can take quite a long time, years and years, before they will eventually hatch out. So it's a slow process, but once you get that system going, you can just have them multiplying as long as you maintain your garden. But as far as the short term, mosquitoes can hatch out very quickly. So what I use is mosquito bits. I put these in the water. The mosquito dunks are said to last longer. I'll put links to both of these, but these will not harm the larvae that the dragonflies are laying, so you don't have to worry about that. So you can add a little bit of this to the pond to keep the mosquito population completely out of it and allow those water growing dragonflies to multiply very quickly and become large enough so they can escape the pond. I'll put a picture to one. I think I had a photograph of one escaping from its shell, hatching out or molting, whatever they call it. But that's one of the things, is you want to keep your mosquito population down because you don't want them to be multiplying quickly. So use some mosquito bits or mosquito dunks in whatever size pond, container, bucket, whatever you decide to use. Remember that putting a solar powered fountain in there might help purify the water, just a nice slow moving fountain, and that might keep the mosquitoes from going in there, because mosquitoes like to lay their eggs in stagnant and still water. Now, about adding fish to your water feature, you don't want to add goldfish or things like koi, because they will get larger and larger and be big enough to eat the dragonfly larvae. You want something really small, like some of the little tiny fish that may be minnows that are specifically for eating the mosquito larvae. You can get that at your local fish store. Talk to your fish supplier at your pet shop and they'll direct you to the right type of fish that's not going to grow really large. Another thing about goldfish and koi, they can get, like I said, they can get really large. Koi, I have some koi that grew over 2 feet long and they just get really big. So something like this wouldn't even be possible, but they will grow quickly. So just remember, you want to get the small fish and use them sparingly as to where they won't eat your larvae up and you'll end up with no dragonflies in your yard. Now about layering this pond, at the very bottom I'm going to put gravel and then I'm going to put in some soil, but on top of that I'm going to add some leaf litter under some large trees that has been slowly decomposing over a long period of time, and then I'll add maybe some gravel and sand, but I'll leave some of that leaf litter exposed because I want it to be as a natural environment as possible to make sure that they're able to eat, they can grow, and they don't have to worry about running out of food. So just remember, leaf litter will benefit you greatly in your small water feature. Even if it's the size of a bucket, just grab a handful of it and put it in there next to your aquatic plant. Now another thing you want to add to it is some driftwood or logs. You may have to anchor it. If it's still very buoyant, you may have to wire it to a rock so it stays partially submerged. And that being partially submerged underwater is for the larvae that's swimming around, and up above is for the dragonflies to come in and have a place to land. So driftwood is a great thing you can add. Also, I'll put a link if I can find some on Amazon, but driftwood, you can get it at any pet store, and it would really be an added benefit to the larva, dragonfly larva, growing in your container. Now, if you live in an area that gets really cold, hard freezes, you're going to want to add a very small water heater. It's usually made for pets to keep their water from freezing in the winter time. I've got one around the greenhouse here somewhere. I take it out of the water. In one of my water features, there's a small fountain next to my house, but I take it out and put it back in depending on the time of year. But they use a very low wattage, sometimes 20, 30, maybe 40 watts, and it keeps the water from freezing. So that really helps your dragonfly larvae that would completely freeze if it froze all the way to the bottom. Now, if it just freezes on the very top, maybe they'll survive with no problem. But I just like that little added bit of protection by putting one of those into the water. I'll put a link to it in the description if you want to do that if you live in an area that gets really cold winters. Now, we just went through a massive drought in our summer, and we've had 3 weeks. Until today, we had not had any rain for, I'd say, about 3 to 3.5 weeks, and it has been extremely hot. And so that's another thing you have to take into account. You want to make sure that you have some continuous water coming into the pond for evaporation. What I have is I have a rainbird system, and I have micro irrigation set up inside the pond, so it puts about 1 to 2 minutes of water in there every day. It doesn't use a lot of water, but it just keeps it from drying out, because once it dries out, those larvae will probably die really quickly. Now, if you don't have an irrigation system already, you can buy something like this that hooks up to your hose pipe, your outlet, and these are not that expensive, and I'll put a link to one down below. But you can have this in the summertime when you have a lot of evaporation going on, where you can set it up and you don't have to worry about your water feature drying out and all of your dragonflies dying. Now, if you would rather create a bog area in your yard, that's not that complicated to do. This is a pond liner I picked up from Lowe's, and they sell these on all these things I'm talking about. I'm going to put in the description below, but this is about 12 by 12, and it will last for years and years. You can dig out an area in your yard that you want to create a bog feature, and you can plant things like the canna lily, the horsetail I showed you, and that will grow very quickly and do very well if you make it about 1 foot to 1.5 foot deep, and just make sure that it doesn't run out of water, as we talked about before. If you have the energy and you can dig it 3 feet deep and kind of layer in different layers of sand and gravel and soil, that will probably not dry out through the entire summer. I think the pickerel is one of my favorite plants, and that's why I'm planning on ordering some more. It multiplies so quickly, grows so well, and it's just an amazing plant for a bog garden. Now, not to put too fine of a point on it, but you do need to make sure that you have those perching stakes, whether you have a plant like this. And like I said, these will die back in the winter and return the next year. So maybe something more permanent like the green plant stakes I showed you earlier, or you can find some small bamboo stakes about 3 to 4 foot at your local hardware store, Lowe's, Home Depot, Ace Hardware. And those work really good as year-round perching stakes, because this will not be fully grown till maybe middle way through the summer. So you want those dragonflies to really feel at home by doing that. If you've ever been fishing before, you notice that dragonflies will often land on the end of your fishing rod. That's a very common thing to happen, because that's where they feel really comfortable. So I know I mentioned that earlier in the video, but I just want to make sure that whatever size bog garden, container garden, water feature, whatever you're putting together, make sure you put those perching stakes in there. That is an extremely important component of the entire system. Now, I was showing you different bog plants you could use in your water feature, but one thing you want to make sure you do is you pick plants that will put out flowers. This put out a beautiful flower early in the year. But as I said earlier, the pickerel just constantly produce bright purple flowers, but the equisetum or the horsetail do nothing. They just more of a perching thing. So you want to make sure that whatever you're planting, it will bloom and draw in those insects that the dragonflies will feed off of. Believe it or not, mosquitoes do pollinate flowers. It's just when they're breeding, they need a certain component of human blood, and so the female comes and bites you so they can get that, so they can lay the eggs, so they can reproduce. But just remember, flowers will draw those pollinators in, and also the dragonflies when they go hunting. Now, if you live in an area close to the beach, or you often get a lot of wind gusts during storms, dragonflies are very strong flyers, but you might want to put up a windbreak around your water feature, not right next to it, but maybe several feet away, so it can slow down the wind and allow those dragonflies a place to reproduce in that pond. So I found that one of the best things for me for creating windbreaks is a plant called sweet olive, and it smells really great. It grows well in shade or sun. It can tolerate both in my area, but it really kind of slows down the wind around it, and it creates an incredibly good smelling flower. Now, there's so many different plants. Depending on what area you live in, you'll just be able to pick whatever works best for you, but you just want to have that windbreak in place so it can slow down the breezes and allow that perfect environment for your dragonflies. Now, wherever you put your water feature, I know that there's been a trend lately about people putting out synthetic mulches, and I would advise against doing that, because the plastic mulches are not the ideal place for this type of insect. You want to use an organic mulch, something that has never been treated with any pesticide, and that's another important feature. You don't want any pesticides because they will succumb to it. So I try to use as many natural things in my vegetable garden that won't harm them. But again, the mulch, just an ordinary shredded pine bark or anything like that, whatever you have in your area, put it around your water feature and around the plants, and that will really help by keeping a lot more moisture in them. Now, I wanted to bring this point up again. As I showed you at the beginning of the video, a slow moving stream actually attracts dragonflies. They're attracted to it because they can lay their eggs in pockets where the water is pooling, or in the bog area, such as what I have, where it just recirculates the water back around. So a slow moving stream can attract dragonflies, not only for laying their eggs, but as a hunting area as well. Now, another really important thing to take into consideration is if you have predatory birds and you want to make sure that you use something that's going to protect the larvae in your pond, whatever size you have, container like this, bucket, whatever it is, potted plant, whatever size you have, you want to make sure over the water area that you put things like water lilies, watered lettuce, if I can get that out. So you want to protect them by having that on the surface of the water so they can safely be under where they're not being constantly eaten and devoured by predatory birds or other things like lizards or things that might get into the pond and decimate your dragonfly population. Now, another thing that you can add to your pond that will really help your dragonflies is adding flat stones. Now, you can purchase them at your local hardware, Lowe's, Ace, whatever it is, Home Depot, but use 2 or 3 of the stepping stones around the outside of your pond, and that will allow them a place to land light and decide whether or not they want to lay eggs in it. So those rocks heat up in the sunlight, and it provides the perfect environment, especially in the cooler times of the year, that dragonflies want to have a safe place to light land and to consider where they're going to lay their eggs. Now, a note on the perfect hunting ground for dragonflies is a large open area. If you have a spot in your yard that you're thinking about planting trees along with your water feature, you want to try to avoid doing that, because you want to leave an open area where they'll have a large area to do hunting. And I remember about maybe 20 years ago, we were at the beach and there were millions of dragonflies hunting in the open area of the beach. It wasn't in the shaded area where the trees were. It was completely out in the open. So remember, is the perfect ideal hunting place for your dragonflies will be the open area, the most open area of your yard, where they can have a clear flight path to fly around and eat those mosquitoes. Now, a friend of mine had a large bird bath, and I was amazed to see that there were actually dragonflies swimming around in the water in the nymph form, and they would eventually make it to become full-size dragonflies. He had a little heater in the water, he had some stones in there, and he had some different aquatic plants. It was a very large bird bath, but that's what it was. So if something as simple as that can be the perfect environment for your dragonfly. You don't have to go all out and create a massive pond, as some people will tell you. Something really small that's well maintained and the water is always in there, not allowing it to dry out. Something like that can be a perfect environment for a dragonfly as well. So I was doing research about the life of an ecosystem for dragonflies, and it said that these type of predators are up. So that's why a lot of times when you develop a piece of property, the mosquitoes are terrible. But once you get the dragonflies established, coming into your yard, reproducing, laying eggs, and going through this life cycle over and over, you'll be amazed at how your mosquito population will just plummet down to almost zero. You might have an occasional one fly in because mosquitoes can go a long way. From the smell of someone's breath, I've heard they can travel up to a football field searching for that meal ticket. So that's one thing to remember, that you still are going to see an occasional mosquito. It's not possible to completely decimate them all the way. Although I did create a container that you can use to help drop the population. I'll put a link to that up above about how to cut down on your mosquitoes. So guys, one of my earliest memories was me and my dad in our driveway, and a dragonfly landed close to us, and I asked him what it was, and he told me, and I thought for many, many years in my childhood, I thought this is something that could sting you and harm you, but it's not true. Dragonflies are very calm. You can actually pet them gently and they won't fly away if you're slow in your movement. So a dragonfly is not something that can harm you, but it's definitely harmful to mosquitoes. So guys, I want to say thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions about this video or any previous videos, please become a public
and discipline remains merciful.
Yes, and man you, Derek, this star. No, it isn't.
Sure.
So you